we'll proceed. I call the meeting to order at 3 o'clock on the dot and request a motion to approve the agenda. And a second, discussion. Seeing none, call the question. All in favour?
There's on table for the item that's noted as on table.
Fine, but that's, where is it? Where is that?
No, we need to. It's
8B.
yeah.
Oh, that one, fine. Okay, that's just the collateral, but I presume everybody's looked at that.
Is that the one that you emailed
Yes.
Sunday?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, good. So, question? All in favour? Opposed? Carried. Public participation, seeing none. Moving to approval of the minutes. Any changes other than under 6A?
Done.
What was that?
I think I even put a little tick mark, which I did.
You liked it?
I thought it was good.
Okay.
Comments here. Yep.
Okay. Well, if we had any, no, you can leave it then. Comments here, if any. There being none, there none. Okay, so motion to adopt. Was it approve or adopt? I can never remember.
Approve.
Approve. Thank you. Approve the minutes as circulated. All in favour, opposed, carried. Business arising. I had one, but I'll let anybody else go first. Okay. Under 5A, we said that we'd bring the parking plan back in September, now being November, and that not happening. I would just tell council that I do intend to bring that back at the next council meeting, which is the.
But you're away the next, so it's
We're not here this-
Oh, no, thank you for reminding me. So it'll be the mid-December council meeting.
20th, December 20th.
Would you like to see a preliminary before that, Peter? I know you have. There are a few changes, not a few substantive ones.
I think that if you send it to me, you should probably also send it to others. But
Yeah, I mean, I have no problem sending it to others, but it's sort of before formal presentation, but at least gives you a
yeah, I'd be interested to.
Fine. Okay, so I will send that out. Given that it's a month away, that we'll present it to council.
Given that it's also a month away, if I can, Mr. Mayor, I think the 7 or 8 action items that came from the, prior to decommissioning of the former parking committee, I think there were 7 or 8 things which memory now escapes me where we did, so if we could have where we are with that at the same time.
Yeah, I think it's probably going to be pretty quick, right, Peter? They either happened or they didn't happen in time for summer.
So in a low touch kind of way.
In a very simplified answer, if you go on the website under, I think, notices, there's something on the website that spot for the parking plan stuff, and it lists all the things that we were
The action items.
that we actually changed or
Okay.
amended, and the go forwards. And if you have any questions, just let me know in terms of the things that
trying to do low
made
maintenance.
things
Where
that
am I
happened or
looking again?
didn't happen.
Where am I looking again?
You look for the parking
it's
plan
under-
information, so it'll show up in the.
I think it's under notices and
Notices, thank you.
Yeah, because we don't have.
Thank you, Peter. Then I retract, and I'll just do that.
You good with that? Yeah, I mean, some of them will become academic anyway. So, if we do adopt a new parking plan with time for execution for next summer, they'll all just sort of get rolled into the changes. Okay, so any other business arising? No, we'll move on to unfinished business. There being none, we'll move to reports. I see none, but are there?
Not other than the new business.
Yeah, so we'll go straight to new biz. Okay, and I believe, Steve, that'll be you. Please feel welcome and lay it on us.
Thank you. Well, I have been retained to undertake a review of the zoning bylaws with the primary purpose to consolidate them into a single bylaw for Lions Bay. So I won't go through a lot of detail because I'm sure you all know the background probably a lot better than I do actually. But what I have a terms of reference. I've attached a copy to the report just for information, so understand the scope of my work. I'll spend a few minutes just at the beginning here going through an overview of the report that I presented to you, and then we'll just get into some discussion and then close off at the end of the session on this particular item with what we intend to do for next steps.
Okay, sounds good. I think you should take it for granted that we've all read the report, so we don't need a sort of verbatim reiteration. Pull out the stuff
Definitely
that
not.
you think we need to know.
Yeah. I wanted to include the zoning definitions as part of the key, and I had attached a lot of information at the back showing a black line version and a clean version of the consolidation. Gives you an idea of just how stitching two separate bylaws together can be actually end up being quite complex. What I found when I was reviewing the definitions of the bylaw was that there were 16 unused terms, mainly from the Brunswick Beach bylaw, and probably as a result of it just being sort of a chopped off version of an old GBRD bylaw. There's a couple of items which need some thought. There's a little bit of a conflict in the home occupation definition with the regulation in terms of definition says it could be in an accessory building, and the regulation says it has to be in the main dwelling. So these are things that need to be reconciled as we move through this process. There's a few other little things. There's a number of situations where the bylaw regulates users as opposed to use. And that is something that in a number of areas there's issues that need to be dealt with around that. Because zoning is only authorized to regulate use. So when you get into residential uses, that can be problematic when you're looking at different types of tenure and so forth. I think that's about it. There's a couple of obsolete terms which sort of show the age of some of the original bylaws, references to satellite dishes when they used to be 12 feet in diameter and sitting in people's front yards in the early 80s, and might even be reference to pool and billiard halls in there somewhere. I'm not sure, but those are certainly relics of a different era.
We had one of those in our, close to our front yard for a few years.
Dish.
Dish, yeah. Not ours, I
So
know.
those are sort of technical aspects of the bylaws that I'm looking at, and there's a number of other things that I'll be getting to in the future with work, and some I've already done, but just not really worthwhile spending a lot of time in this venue. Secondary suites is I've been informed that's kind of a front of mind issue in Lions Bay, especially around parking. So what I looked at was the existing regulations and just how they're structured and where they come from, and the primary regulations actually come from building code, and they're very common to many zoning bylaws around the Lower Mainland in BC. What else? The parking. The requirement for a third parking stall or parking space is a very common one for secondary suites, but given the obvious terrain constraints through most of Lions Bay, that can be problematic, I understand. And there's also a desire or concern about having people spill over onto the street. So there's a number of potential options that I've put in the report, some of them possibly more viable than others. Nothing probably really truly satisfying. It's a difficult situation. But there's a range of getting rid of the parking requirement altogether, which some places have done, to maintaining status quo, looking at variances, looking at setback relaxations on a case-by-case basis, or even potentially licensing on street parking.
We have well, I suppose it's not unusual, it's not needed, but we have an issue around, we don't really know where the street begins and the boulevard starts or ends, and property lines and stuff like that, so it's all very hazy. So we've got a lot of property around the village where strange bushes have grown up along the edge of the property, so the boulevard's all taken up and there is no real parking. So that's one of the first issues that may have to be addressed when it comes to the secondary suite parking and stuff like that.
Well, I'll just maybe run through the last couple
Yeah,
items
no,
here.
that's good.
Yep.
We'll discuss The third item I looked at was density and the desire that's been expressed to me to think about the potential for some kind of density bonusing. Your OCP designates a couple of sites, adjacent sites in Kelvin Grove, as potential new development. It doesn't specify the scale, but there's a examination of the options and the alternatives about some kind of density bonusing or amenity contribution type of an approach, which is done in many areas. And I've given you a kind of a range of samples from very small scale to kind of a big city approach in there, just to show the scope of what's being done. And finally, for this part of the session and the project, just looked at the development permit provisions that are in the back of the zoning bylaw. And again, those might, I don't know, I haven't seen like the original versions of Lions Bay zoning, like when it was first adopted, which may be in the 70s. And those development permits may date from that era, because there was a time when development permits could be in zoning, but that I started in 1980, and that predates me. So I don't know how they got in the zoning bylaw, but for many, many years it's been official community plans that actually need to designate development permit areas. I've looked through what you've got there, and some of it is development permit topics. Some of the aspects that are covered by the development permit section in the zoning it can be dealt with in other matters, possibly through the zoning even. So that's the first little work package that I did to get this project started, and probably stop talking at this point and start listening and answering some questions.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Yeah, this topic can be as big as you let it become, I suspect. So I think ultimately what we're expecting out of this exercise is a suite of policies, some up to and including the level of bylaw, some more work methods, and everything in between, that allows us to take Lions Bay forward according to its current and future OCPs. I think it's fair to say that the current OCP reflects village ethos quite well, although we have been talking about a redo for 3 years, always deferred for budget reasons. The current redo is slated potentially for next year, but as a result of this discovery process, I think we all appreciate just how much extra work it is before we can even get to the point of writing something meaningful. I'm not going to do all the talking. Would it be fair for me to ask if the current OCP, in your professional opinion, having seen, done, and read many, is it pretty boilerplate, or do you get the sense it was fairly well customized to Lions Bay's needs?
I have a feeling it was written by Lions Bay residents and completely customized to Lions Bay's needs.
It didn't look like a cut and replaced of location X with Lions Bay by a consultant.
No, it didn't look like, as I said, because there actually are some things probably missing from the plan that a planning professional would include. But that's more looking at sort of the legislative process. The plan itself reads quite as an organic plan, speaking to the local values and so forth. So very homegrown.
Okay, so you're back to the exercise at hand then. I mean, I'm conscious that thus far, I believe it's correct to say that you haven't really had any consultation with the community as to its desires or needs, other than the OCP, in terms of where we want to see zoning go. This body, of course, being the representatives of the residents, I suppose, would be the first port of call, and that's why you're here today.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that we don't know what the questions are. So we can't give you input because we don't know what is covered by a zoning bylaw, by a development permit bylaw, by all these things that we may have had in the past, but we certainly don't have today. So we're going to have to be guided by you. I don't know if it's sort of question and answer based, or if it's giving us an understanding of the sorts of things that we could opine on, and then giving you that opinion. I don't suggest that that process is going to happen today, but I'm conscious that you don't know what the village wants yet. Because you've only spoken to staff.
So can I jump in here?
That said, you are looking for choices or explanations of the options given in a variety of topics.
Yeah, well,
So
exactly.
we're winging it.
Yeah, in some cases, we tell us which one is the right one.
Yeah.
For example, the parking options. Given the stuff that we know about stated intent to start recovering encroachments for future on-street parking, that's also not developed. It's a very much chicken and egg situation. So we don't really know what the questions are, let alone the answers.
So,
Speak.
with what you have before you today, really, the section on secondary suites and parking options, and some of the things that I'm pointing out on the table here, these are areas that I think Steve is looking to you and to us for direction. So he's laid out, for example, 6 options. Maybe there's more, I don't know. But these are things that, council needs to opine on in terms of what direction do you want to see the bylaw take in respect of these things. Do you want to just see status quo, or do you want to do on-street parking licensing? I mean, just the back of napkin, if you charge somebody $10 a month for suite parking, and you had 100 spaces, that's $12,000 a year. Or if it was just 50 spaces, there's $6,000 a year. So you're talking a percentage point or a half a percentage point of tax increase in revenue, for one thing. That's just one thing I'd point out. Another obvious option might be to do it on a piecemeal approach, whereby, if you say you can do this or you can't do that, and it's a blanket prohibition or allowance throughout the village, there's going to be places, as you know, where it's going to work and places where that's not going to work. So maybe option 4, which speaks to allowing for parking siting variances in accordance with the circumstances at hand. So if you say you can't do this, but you may apply for a variance, then you can look at the circumstances of each particular case and provide a solution that makes sense for that particular site. Maybe that's the best way to go, but I think Steve needs to have your thoughts and comments in that respect in order to move the bylaw forward in that regard.
Through the mayor, I was of the same view. I think to make the meeting fruitful, it's to put more ammo in Steve's chambers here. So using the secondary suites with the six options there, I think however Carl guides us through here, do this in a committee meeting where you give clear direction. So some are yes, some are no, and however we'll put our feedback in.
Yeah, Steve, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say that I started from the premise that the village considered secondary suites something desirable, and that was something that was, for lack of a better word, encouraged, or at least there was a positive view of secondary suites, and it wasn't something that you were really reluctant about having. It was something you wanted to enable. And the issue with compliance with the regulations is that there is problems with people adhering to finding space for a third parking spot. And if we start from that perspective, then as Peter was saying, it may be that it's a matter of potentially having a policy. For variances, and you can vary things that are associated with other options here. You may in some cases eliminate the need for a third parking space. You may vary the setbacks so that a person can achieve their parking closer to a property line. You may even allow for an encroachment over the line onto the road right of way, or, as I mentioned, have a formal licensing approach to where a person finds it worthwhile and feasible for their own situation to look at licensing space on the road.
Yeah, I think getting it down into the weeds of what sort of parking we'll allow in a secondary suite element, and I presume secondary suites move into the new zoning bylaw, That's the tail that wags the dog as far as I'm concerned. I'm sure we can, it's fairly obvious to me what the solution needs to be, but I don't want to only be speaking about that when there's a whole bunch of other issues, form and function, development permit areas, which I assume goes into its own development permit bylaw, but I'm assuming, Peter, that the whole village becomes a DP area.
Not necessarily. For some things, like wildfire permits, or wildfire permit area, you want everybody to perhaps follow certain minimal requirements, fire smarting their property and so forth. But I mean, now you're kind of going back to the development permit topic. Just to clarify, secondary suites are already part of the zoning bylaw. It was an amendment to the zoning bylaw that brought in secondary suites.
Okay.
But they're so what I did, first step, was consolidated the zoning bylaw to incorporate all the amendments, including those regarding secondary suites, and then gave that to Steve so he'd have a consolidated bylaw. So they're already in there. So I mean, if we just sort of in with a view to making progress on this particular topic, it sounded like you had some thoughts about these options.
Yeah, I'm very loath to start delving into the weeds until we understand the full scope. So I'll ask the main question that's top of my head. The proposition here is to try and amalgamate, shoehorn two bylaws into one. Why did we not choose to start with a model bylaw, modern model bylaw?
And
Restart, I should say.
Well, that's an interesting question, but usually I would say that you have a set of regulations that's evolved over many years, and they do probably meet the needs of the community in most cases. What's interesting here is the fact that you've got two separate bylaws. And so you've got a different set of rules for one neighborhood that is really in some areas inconsistent, and there's maybe just little differences. I pointed out one in my report on just how you define grades and how that can affect heights, and that can mean the same dwelling in two different neighborhoods could have would have a different calculation of its height.
But so what? It's a different neighborhood. Or why not start with a single zoning bylaw?
Well, that makes it difficult for everybody in such a small area. It's just something that's unnecessary, and probably a lot of people don't. Well, staff would know the differences, but the general public doesn't necessarily. When I look at the zoning, bringing it together, some of the zoning for Brunswick Beach. Siting requirements especially will probably stay pretty much the same because you don't want to render the community non-conforming, all the siting not legally non-conforming.
So what is meant by that? The fact that people are encroaching?
When the rules change, bylaws came into place like 30, 40 years ago, and in many communities, development predated that. So something that was lawfully established on the date that the bylaw comes into effect remains legal, but it is restricted if it's a use, if it's a commercial use in a residential area that's now zoned residential, but it's existed for many years. That use can continue, I should say, but there's rules under the Local Government Act that say under what circumstances it would have to be basically discontinued. And that's if it burns down, if the actual use is discontinued for a period of time, I think it's about a year, things like that. And there's also restrictions on it being added to and altered. So with siting, it's not as restrictive. Sometimes the province or the government can render a setback non-conforming just by taking some extra land for roadway widening, for example. So the rules around siting are not as restrictive as use.
Does minimum lot size come into that?
Sometimes.
Because I don't need to point out to you that every single one of Lions Bay's lots is non-conforming, except for
Yeah,
maybe
that-
4.
Usually a zoning bylaw deals with that, just by stating that where the lot size isn't achieved, all the uses in the zone can still be undertaken. So the lot size is really about subdivision as opposed to use in most cases.
Right,
and
yeah.
that's-
So that's not a siting issue.
No,
Mm.
not usually.
Okay. Jim, you were going to ask?
Well, I look at the substantive amount of work that's gone into this report, and I realize that it's a review document for council, and we need to digest it, and before we come up with the questions. I mean, I agree with everything that we're talking about around the table, and yes, Lions Bay, although other communities may not say, we're a unique community because of the way we're divided, and
Yeah.
especially if you look at Central Lions Bay, Kelvin Grove, Lions Bay, and then Brunswick, which is part of Lions Bay.
Mhm.
The reality is that Brunswick has traditionally a lot smaller lots and narrower roadways and less boulevard space than anybody else in the village. And so the idea of changing the parking situation the way it works down there right now can take a lot of thought, a lot of process, because if nobody's bitching or complaining about it, then we leave it alone. But at the same time, we have to be able to make sure that I agree that we need to make sure that things are generalized as much as possible, and yet we have to uniquely identify the specific needs of one particular area. I look at where I live down in Isleview, and it's the same, like we've got, I'm a little cul-de-sac, and parking is almost impossible, but we manage, we make it work, you know? And I think most areas in the village are like that, so if we add a rental suite to there, which is a couple up the street from us, it complicates things, but we need to think about that. And so I look at this report, I took a couple hours and went through it and read it, and it's all food for thought. We have to think about it, and I agree that we need to ask questions, and you need to ask questions, and we need to establish the boundaries. But the first thing is, we've got the report, we need to read it. And,
Well, presumably we've read it, so I think what we need
well,
now is...
digest it is what I mean, not read it. Yeah.
No, pretty much digested.
I would hope so. If you have questions you'd like us to give you suggestions on now, fine. But I hope these aren't the only questions, because there's any number of things that I would look for a zoning bylaw to guide future development in Lions Bay on. The fact that we have existing development is neither here nor there. They're grandfathered or site specific or whatever. It is for the instances. The whole exercise that we're spending tens of thousands of dollars on is for about a dozen potential subdivisions and future expansion into existing municipal lands or boundary expansion. So it's to guide, not us, but future staff and future council in a holistic way. For example, give you a case in point, nobody now knows how it came about that our minimum lot size is 10 times the size that it obviously was when Lions Bay was developed. Was that done on purpose? Was that done by mistake in the calculation when they metricized? We don't know. It's what we have now. The new bylaw has to provide a guide for a long term. And so, and we get to decide.
So, the bylaw, as it stands now, already provides guidance with respect to these things. With respect to the minimum lot size, as Steve mentioned, that primarily pertains to any future subdivision as opposed to current usage. Current usage is pretty much locked in.
That's what I just said.
Yeah,
So we've got 12
so-
potential subdivisions within the village and new development, whatever that may be.
So how that came about really is irrelevant. It's there.
That's what I'm saying. It doesn't matter.
And it's useful. It serves a purpose going forward. So it's not something that, in my opinion, we should change. It's something that provides a means by which Lions Bay can approach each subdivision application individually and have control over whether or not that happens. If you go and change your minimum lot size requirement to something that exists today, then anybody will just simply put in an application for subdivision and it will have to be approved because it will meet the
Yeah,
requirements.
I think we all appreciate that. So what I'm asking for, what else do you need to know? What else do you want us to tell you, other than what of these 3 parking options we prefer?
Well, let me maybe step back a bit because there's been a few comments that I'd like to just make a point or two. A zoning bylaw regulates not only the future potential for subdivision and different uses and so forth. It guides like all the rest of the property. There's how many lots in Lions Bay? 500?
550?
Yeah, so land use evolves over time. I mentioned the obsolete ones. I took a look at Airbnb and short-term rentals, and almost every community in this part of the world is an issue now. There's hardly anywhere where it's outright allowed for short-term rentals. Places like Whistler and some other places have nightly rental provisions on a site-by-site basis. But it's an emerging issue that is affecting communities generally, and it's one where we need to look at how do we respond through zoning if it's considered an issue here. In many places, where I live in Pemberton, they've had secondary suites. I was saying to Peter, in Pemberton, every home is assumed to have a suite, and they're taxed for utilities on that basis, and if you don't have a suite, they'll come and inspect and confirm you don't, then you'll get a regular utility rate. But now in Pemberton, what's happening is people who've been renting those suites, which have been mortgage helpers over the years, the renters are getting displaced. Because many of the suites, there's at least a dozen, just when I took a casual look last week, that look like they're suites, that have been previously rented. Now they're on nightly basis. In Lions Bay, there's not so many, but there's houses which are absentee owned, and places like California where the ownership is. And I know working on the Sunshine Coast, we had issues with houses like that. If they became party houses or something, they become very disruptive in the neighborhood. And so you want to have, through your zoning, and there's sometimes other tools as well, but you want to have clear regulations that will stand up to legal scrutiny if you actually need to enforce them.
No, I mean, we know, I think we all appreciate that's why we're having to do it, to
Okay,
evolve.
well, I was starting to wonder, because the OCP and the zoning pretty, the way I understand it, the zoning pretty much reflects what's in the OCP. When I look at a zoning bylaw, I can basically look at any zoning bylaw and start reviewing it from a technical perspective. Because you look at things like how the bylaw is actually structured and drafted, the use of terminology. There's certain rules in writing legislation where you don't use 2 different terms to mean the same thing. Just internal consistency, things like that. Like in this bylaw, or the Lions Bay bylaw, that's what I did in the first phase of this exercise, was through familiarizing myself with the bylaws. I just made note of where there's little fixes need to be made throughout. But when it gets to the substance, then it becomes like I need the feedback from the council, because I certainly have my opinions on what I would like to see, but it's really my task is to put into the bylaw what you want to see for your own community. So if there's no, if you're neither here nor there on a particular matter, then my suggestion will always be is just go with sort of the best practice type planning approach. But in other areas, there may be, you've got some owner occupancy requirements around suites and houses. The main homeowner needs to be resident in conjunction with the suite. Like, I look at that and I say, well, that's kind of, you're regulating tenure. But places like West Vancouver still continue to have those types of provisions, they're problematic, but they still try and work with that notion of having owner occupancy. So that's, on certain matters like that, I would be advising you that you're gonna be on really shaky ground.
I think Peter told us that one of the first things he ever told us. So I guess the overarching question is, we need the list of all the issues you want to hear our opinion on.
Well,
Well, pages 6 and 7 would be a start.
Okay?
Yeah, but that's only some of them. So, for example, do we? Is there a question? Do we zone the whole village a new zone, X1, to allow for multifamily, or are we going to go with RS1 and zoning variances?
You're not gonna zone your whole community multifamily without changing your community plan, and that's like a major policy sort of change in direction by opening up to that extent. So at this point, what you're doing with your zoning is, typically what I would be thinking is, I'll use an example of the marinas, your marina zone, because there's 5 of them. I had a bit of a meeting with Dave Butler, and we went and took a look at the site. But I don't know why there's 5 different zones down there. That could easily be 1, or maybe 2, but you could roll that all up into something.
I believe the reason there is the different land ownership there. Some of it's crown lease, provincial, federal, owned, and even in one small case, a peppercorn. You don't know how to use that. A lease for $1, because Lions Bay Beach Park actually runs over marina land, and in consideration of wangling access for their driveway, which is here, which goes on CN land. This swap was done. Handwritten agreement signed by the first mayor of Lions Bay, Curly Stewart, in the 70s. So I suspect that's why I don't know, and that's why the history is interesting, somewhere between interesting and important.
On first glance, to me, my comment is that it's very fine-grained zoning for what's an extremely simple zoning bylaw in its overall structure.
Yeah.
You've got 5 different elements. Just having a quick look, there's boat storage. One looks like a surface of the water with ramps and a wharf, and that may be the public. Actually, I guess I see 3 zones there, but those are the sorts of things that I'd be looking at. Peter gave me a terms of reference, which does outline issues that I'm meant to address as part of this.
The terms of reference are good. The one thing, Peter, just remind me, did we ask Steve to look at, and I don't even know if there's zoning or use, or if that's the same
Zoning
thing.
is used.
Yeah, okay. Watershed areas, currently zoned watershed.
Surface of water.
No, watershed. So areas that were deemed watershed when the intakes were in their original locations and are no longer watershed. So just to point out on the map, we have 2 intakes. Here's one and here's the other. Okay, so everything above that point is watershed and everything below that point is not watershed.
It's outside your boundaries.
Yes. So
You
this,
can't zone that.
but we can zone this, and this is zoned watershed, I think, all the way down to the original location of the intake, which is at this tank here. So this is all zoned watershed, I believe.
Okay.
And similarly for Harvey, I know because I live there. Sorry, I'm pointing at the wrong thing. Alberta. This is zoned watershed. This is not even an intake anymore. It could be potentially because the intake structure is
Sort of
So-
existing.
I think, Carl, what you're referencing is the
somewhere.
map designations in the OCP.
That's what I'm saying. Was that
That's
zoning?
not the same thing as zoning.
That's not the same thing as zoning.
No.
So I guess where I'm
So-
going with that particular question is, I would like to recover everything that is obsolete zoning for a better use, a higher and better use, whatever that is, whether it's recreation or watershed within the village limits is obsolete, for example,
What do you mean by obsolete?
because our intakes are now somewhere else.
But you still want to protect your watersheds to the extent that you don't want development intruding. So, for example, and just as a starting point, you would typically have a riparian area regulation development permit area, which is, boundaries of, either side of any creeks or water courses, is going to be protected. And so if you're in an area close to any water course, then you've got to get a development permit, and that will restrict your ability to develop the land and what you can and can't
Sure.
do. Within your OCP, you could have a watershed designation on the map, and under your OCP, you could say the types of protections and qualities that you want to protect around your watershed, because it's your water supply, for instance, and those sorts of principles and guiding statements would be in your OCP.
Yeah, I understand
not
that.
in your zoning.
I'm not
bylaw.
looking to protect the streams for riparian reasons, especially as these are non-sediment bearing. That's a whole different thing. That's provincial. Watershed is everything uphill of a water intake.
So my question, I don't know, are the watersheds you're referring to, are they actually designated as community watersheds, like by the province?
I don't think so.
They're certainly in the
Probably.
OCP as such. The province, I know this from the OCP that's just been formulated now for electoral area A, consider everything right outside our boundaries in the Crown lands to be resource extraction, whatever that means. But that's again, is that a zone or a designation or a use? I don't know the difference.
Well, what the difference is between an OCP essentially contains recommendations around future land use. So it looks forward, and it's a forward-looking document, and it can identify things like in Lions Bay, the areas for potential future development. That's a good example. It also, in a land use map, which looks very similar to a zoning map, will identify your existing neighborhoods and typically define them as single detached residential. And it may have some policies if there's room for some neighborhood commercial to go in, and what the criteria would be for evaluating a land use change to accommodate some small scale business in neighborhoods, for example. And then it also has the environmental protection type policies and potentially guidelines under development permits.
Yeah.
So in the case of a resource use, that will be oftentimes, could be crown land, but it's usually undeveloped land. In an OCP, it may reflect a number of different values and interests. So if there's forest, around much of the province where there's forestry licenses, it will show on an OCP, but a local government has very limited authority to regulate forestry activities. In fact, the Local Government Act used to have very specific exclusions about you just don't meddle with forestry.
Not in BC, no.
So when it comes to watersheds, and I can look it up after the meeting, there's a provincial website that shows all the designated community watersheds.
Well, it would be concerning to me if our actual watershed was not so designated.
It probably is.
Yeah, I don't think so, because I know from the metro maps that I've seen, I don't see that on the other side of the hill, for the, whatever that reservoir, well, I'm putting on the map now, but in reality here, on the other side of this hill, Seymour and Capilano, those slopes that run down into there are certainly designated watershed. I don't think ours are.
Well, Metro Vancouver is quite unique in that it owns or has like a very strong jurisdiction over its watershed. So Metro Vancouver controls its watershed to that main watershed of the Seymour and Capilano
Do they?
anyway, much more than many other communities can only dream and have lobbied for many years over to have similar protective guidelines. I guess the getting to the point when you're looking at your maps here and you see areas designated watershed, the reason I ask the question is if it's designated by the province or not, because that will then affect your ability to zone.
Sure.
It would just be an additional step if it was obsolete and you no longer require that designation because your intake's much further up the mountainside now, and there's area between an old and a new intake that may be available for additional uses, and all you look at that in your.
Okay, so I'm asking for that. That something is near and
Well,
dear
that's
to
not
my.
something in I think that's something in an OCP review you should be looking at.
But is that not a zoning issue? We can zone that differently. Maybe a new
You would-
residential zone or a.
Well, you would want to look at that in your OCP.
And would the bylaw that we're now undertaking accommodate that, or would it be a new bylaw, a revision to an amended bylaw?
You really have to go through a process of looking at your community plan first. And then the zoning actually implements the community plan. The zoning bylaw, so your OCP is forward-looking and it's policy-oriented. And the big difference is that the zoning bylaw is the set of rules.
Yeah.
And it's what you can and cannot do.
To implement the
And-
OCP, that is its
yeah.
that is its
Yeah.
genesis. Yeah.
And it has to be consistent, the zoning has to be consistent with the OCP.
Okay.
So, so you can't do a lot of zoning changes without going back to your community plan.
Can you do the two in isolation?
Yes. Yes.
You're saying that because you are.
Well, and that's very typical, because what's been identified here in Lions Bay, and the primary purpose of my contract is to get a nice, good, solid base here that's workable.
For
So-
the immediately
for the zone.
conceivable work.
And so that, I think as Steve speaks to in his report, some of the principles of the OCP in which, the community is, things about moving forward in an incremental way, which is something that we talked about in the strategic planning session and which is part of our strategic plan, is to look at opportunities within the existing OCP where we can make incremental changes.
So this is just to fix,
This is
just to handle that.
This is to implement some of the ideas that are already possible within our OCP,
Yeah, okay.
and to move forward in an incremental manner. And so that's why we would want to set up the zoning bylaw going forward with safeguards that allow us to, we got stop checks built in. People can't just go ahead and do stuff. They have to come before council, make an application. You can look at the particular circumstances, and if it makes sense in those particular circumstances to grant a rezoning or subdivision, then you move forward. And you're implementing those areas that are already designated potential development on the OCP, or areas, larger lots which may be capable of encompassing some of the principles that the OCP recognizes through such things as secondary suites. So the idea of secondary suites is to provide alternative housing forms and very minimal densification of your community, your existing built-out community. And so you do so carefully through things like introducing secondary suites, or considering whether or not you want to have carriage houses on a lot that might be large enough, because it's the same sort of principle. You're just taking that secondary suite and detaching it, but then different rules do apply. So I think the approach is, as we discussed and as is set out in the strategic plan, let's do this incrementally. We've already got parameters within the OCP. We don't have to do a whole rewrite of the OCP. We move forward with a zoning bylaw that enables us to do it in a strategic manner and to go forward in the areas that we've already discussed. I'm probably going to start repeating myself. If I
yourself?
keep going any further, so I'll stop.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good reminder that this is not going to be the be all and end all. This is let's call it a leapfrog at best, but incremental probably is where we go. So perhaps what we should do is run through each of our reviews. I've flagged. I mean, there's nothing to really dispute here. I think we can probably answer the questions that are raised within the report quite easily. How binding that is, I don't know. We'll have to be guided by Peter on that one. But I think we can give you a sense of what the community would expect as encompassed by our interpretation of the OCP. But you were going to say before?
I was just going to say before as well as a consolidation, there are some specific issues that are going to be addressed in this. We've talked about the secondary suites and parking. That's kind of one of the top ones. But the next session that I come back to, I'll have some, the terms of reference that were given to me just say don't provide for short-term rentals. So there'll be something about short-term rentals and the issues there. Marijuana dispensaries is something that, like, I've been involved with working on that over the last, it seems like 4 years, and it's been a bit of a moving target with the federal government, but there's still some, your bylaw is silent when it comes to any of this matter, and so it's something that I'll be bringing forward some options. The other matter that was outlined was the need for zoning of the foreshore, because there's some concerns there, and presently your surface of water offshore between, was it 1,000 feet?
2,000 feet.
Yeah, and this is something that's a topic for discussion as well, to what extent should that be regulated? There's plenty of options, and there is jurisdiction. You have to, you start looking again with local government. You look at sort of the spheres of concurrent jurisdiction, or whatever the terminology is. But federal navigation comes into play to a certain extent when you're looking at the surface of the ocean, but there's still room for local government to regulate wharves, regulate structures on the ocean. Houseboats can be troubling sometimes. It depends whether they're fixed.
Yeah, boom anchoring.
Sea-doo noise you just can't deal with, because that's depends.
Yeah, I know the guys down the road at Ocean Point and Strachan had a huge. They realised that their wharves were each required a zoning variance because the structure was too close to the property line. So they had to, So yes, we need all of that. Down here, we are contemplating at some point in the future making provision for a desalination plant. Do we need some special zoning for the foreshore? This you will see, this is some kind of funky foreshore lease that we think was maybe, is now designated park, we can't really tell, that may have been put in place to prevent log booms from being anchored in that very spot. Because as I understand it, there's actually nothing preventing somebody from anchoring a log boom wherever the hell they want.
Well, other than they need a crown foreshore.
But to go and apply for one.
You would have possibly a very strong influence, although I've had plenty of dealings with the province on the Sunshine Coast over the last 5 years, and the dock issue there in Pender Harbor specifically, this is residential docks. We had the guy from Lululemon, that one made the news. He was proposing a gigantic wharf off his property and impacting adjacent neighbors. Siting the wharf in such a way that minimized the impact and the use of his foreshores and maximize the impact on the neighbors.
Yeah, clever that.
So what you can do, like if you've got a zoning in place, you're in the game when it comes to being involved in approvals.
That's where we want to be.
And so you may not necessarily zone specifically for desalinization, but if all you're allowed is a private dock of a certain area, then anything else requires rezoning. So if there's a proposal that's felt as being adverse to the community interest, then you have that zoning approval.
Do we currently allow private docks?
I'm not. I haven't seen a zoning map yet, but no. If the water is unzoned, there may be a general provision in one of the bylaws. Sometimes I've seen bylaws. I can't quote these ones from memory yet, but sometimes there'll be prohibitions on you know, trying to use houseboats or something like that, you know, sleeping on the surface of water or something like that. But generally, if you're unzoned on the ocean, then the wharves and anything else is permitted. It's all subject to obtaining licenses or leases from the province.
Sure. The reason I ask is specifically on the Lions Bay Avenue properties here. There are the remains of piers and pilings that clearly at one point were probably pre-municipal days.
Before there was a road.
Say again?
Probably before the road.
Yeah, possibly. As those properties are starting to change hands at $3, $5, $6 million, people are making noises about resurrecting them as private docks. And we first need to decide if we want to do that. If we like the idea of docks going down to the water from every property, and then allow for them or not. As I say, I know that particular issue is a big thing at Ocean Point because the structure that attached to the land was actually contrary to the zoning in every case. So they had to fix that. Being that, you know, that's the electoral area A zoning over there. So again, I come back to this thing is, we don't know all the questions. We don't know what our options are. We can opine on these, certainly. But you need to tell us what else we need to tell you you want to know.
Well, report number 2, Steve's going to come back with recommendations or options with respect to tourist accommodation rentals, marijuana dispensaries, water zoning, and some of the other things that are in the terms of reference. So, apart from asking any additional questions or providing him with additional direction with respect to parking options and secondary suites and things that are in this report, if you want to look forward, then you know, the other thing that he'll be looking at is the establishment of development permit areas and development permits and guidelines in the OCP. So that'll be by way of an OCP amendment bylaw. So things along that line, and he's given you a table of some of the things about, you know, the things that are currently in the zoning bylaw that shouldn't be there, and things that you can address through development permits and things that you can't. But if there's questions now about those sorts of things, or if you want to wait and see what he comes back with.
No, I think we'd much prefer you to be working more or less in the direction we want to go, rather than have you guess wrong and then start again in January.
Well, the way I approach almost all of these things, unless there's really only one possible option, I usually lay out.
Okay. Okay, good.
You know, that's the goal, is to have 2 or 3 options for moving forward on many things. Some of it, you know, when it's just sort of good practice, or this is how something should be structured, because that's the convention for doing it, I'm going to do it that way.
Clearly.
But
Yeah.
those are, like, it's the policy and the bigger issues. There's little fixes here and there that when you see them, you know, there's a logic and a practical purpose for doing something. And
Well,
it's-
let's knock these off then. Let's start with this table on page 3 of your report, because that's sort of the one that we sort of broached the most. This is to do with secondary suites, obviously. So I think it's fair to say, on behalf of council, that yes, Lions Bay does wish to encourage secondary suites.
Yeah.
The parking, therefore, I think it would be also fair to say that of the options you present, the only one I would be interested in, anyway, speaking for myself, is a variance on the setback requirement. I don't think Lions Bay is in the business of charging people for parking on its roads, except in special pay parking designated areas. They will be few and far between. Just before we got started, we started talking about the parking plan that's coming. Would the parking plan require special zoning as a pay parking area, or is that just a piece of land is designated as such?
So, for instance, Steve,
within
Jim, maybe
the
you could
road?
point out where the CN lot is, just above Lions Bay Beach Park there.
That's right here.
So just above the tracks,
Yeah, it's just,
right across the
It's just-
tracks
it's just
from
right up
the
here.
park. Well, that'd be the gravelly area, the cleared area.
Okay.
In any event, so there's a lot there. So
It's here, so it's this, so
whether or not we would, I don't know whether you create a zone for parking or whether you it's not even our land. It's CN land.
it's leased.
It's within their. Okay, so we lease it from.
So I mean, the
from
plan,
CN.
just to give you a sense, we were thinking about doing paid parking there, here, here. This is for this beach area here, and here at Sunset, which is a big drop off for this hiking trail up here.
Right.
To put, but that's not a zoning issue, is it? That we just designate certain areas of the street as being paid parking areas.
Yes, if it's on the street, absolutely. If you've got an actual lot that you're using, then you start getting into questions about zoning.
I believe
so-
that it's designated as parking right now.
So zones would pertain to parcels as opposed to
Well, as opposed to right of way.
unsubdivided right of way or other crown lands or whatever that are not.
Not
Or
road.
municipal lands.
Parking is associated with roads,
Yeah.
so on-street parking, but once you get into a private property,
Mhm.
if that, like, the zoning becomes a factor. Because if the area that you're using parking is zoned R1 or RS1, and you've got a parking lot, then what if somebody else decides they're gonna put a parking lot in an RS1?
Well, in terms of the discussion here, none of it is private land. It's either municipal land or roadway. So, okay, I think what we'll probably end up doing is sending you a sort of a list of notes on some of these things.
Sure.
So in terms of the parking for secondary suites, maybe before we get there, you've broached the idea, what do we think, colleagues, about carriage houses? Which is currently not allowed. Secondary suite is required to be attached and no more than 90 square meters or 40% of the area of the house.
My lot would be perfect for a carriage house using.
Does this get around the subdivision issue?
I mean, it accomplishes the aims, which is additional housing.
Which is stated in the OCP, and I think this council understands the need to provide a price point in housing that draws in the kind of people that we think we need in Lions Bay for the future.
Well, just to clarify, I don't think the OCP out and out allows for carriage houses. What it has is there is wording within the OCP, sort of in terms of general principles, to encourage alternative forms of housing and some minor densification. So, taking the leap to create an allowance for something like carriage houses would be something that, would be, I presume, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, if that's sort of a direction that you'd like to consider, then it's probably something that you want to get community feedback on. So in terms of when this goes out to the public, which I think Steve's recommended early January, if you have it on that consultation as an option, and what do people think about it, and here's what it would look like, and here's how it would affect your use, and these are maybe some of the criteria that would have to be considered if it was going to be allowed or not allowed, then you put that out there and you get some feedback from the community. Maybe that people like it, maybe they don't. Anyway, you'll find out without sort of saying this is what we're doing and then finding out after the fact that, well, that was a mistake.
So for me then, thank you very much for bringing us back on track, Peter. I think that you can't do the doing without saying it. So secondary suites, duplexes, carriage houses would be fine with me, and my thrust along this would go that way. And there, I provided my input. I would wait guidance in terms of public disclosure so the community can weigh in.
When you say duplexes, do you mean fourplexes too, or do you specifically mean only 2 dwelling units in a structure?
I'm baby stepping, I'm doing 2 because it's hard to imagine where the rise doesn't impede a lot of views at this point.
Well, yeah, unless it's a fourplex.
Yeah, well, you'd have to go 2 and 2 vertical.
Well, and I think the OCP specifically does refer to provision for duplexes, if I'm not mistaken.
Specifically duplexes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about age-friendly provisions, Steve? Is that a specific zoning issue saying that this zone is designated for age-friendly, or is that just a configuration of the actual dwelling itself?
Yeah, I think the type of dwelling, so a carriage house, may provide a certain opportunity for a certain age segment, either an older or a younger segment. I think that there's, I included a few bulleted points from the OCP around the density, and there's room, like I would say there's room to interpret that carriage houses are consistent with the OCP.
That's my read. Yeah, I'm not as
Yeah,
pessimistic
it's
as
pretty
him.
reasonable to conclude that. And as I know from my experience with zoning, zoning bylaw I've worked with for a long time, and it's been in place for 30 years so across the way. There's no distinction, a suite where it was allowed, because they, in that rural or sort of larger, like a little less dense community, you needed to have half an acre before you could have a secondary suite. But they also allowed, they just termed it a cottage in those days, and you were only allowed one or the other, but the rules were the same. So in this example here, where you've got, the building code actually specifies the 90 meters or
Yep.
40%.
Yep.
But if you stuck along the same lines as a 90 square meters, but it just can be in a separate dwelling, there's no difference. You've still got the same parking issues, you've got other, like all the same
Yeah.
sort of zoning package. You just have it detached as opposed to part of the same building.
Well, except that there would be some additional issues that one would have to take into consideration. And that is, if you've got a separate building, then you've eaten up some of that area that might have been parking. As well, you've got consideration of in Lions Bay, a vast majority of the lots are serviced by septic. So is there room, because you've got to make sure that you've got your septic field, and does that septic field have the capacity?
But that's not a zoning issue.
I guess the capacity
Well,
is gonna,
yeah.
the capacity is gonna be the same whether it's secondary suite or carriage house, but you've gotta have room for the actual septic field.
In fact, I think you'd probably get more formality in the carriage house approach to actually enforce the septic requirements. So does this do away with the need for even subdivision? Can somebody say, okay, I'm going to build myself a carriage house?
Yeah, you don't subdivide for
Yeah.
that. This would be a permitted use, just like a secondary suite is a permitted use within an RS1 zone.
And I'm hearing you say that is it currently permitted, or would it, is it,
No. not
it's
correct.
contemplated under the OCP, however?
It's not directly, I don't think. You have to do, you can do a word search and see if any of the typical languages.
Yeah, cottage,
But it's,
carriage.
well, yeah, I don't think it specifically refers to carriage houses, but when you talk about duplexes and secondary suites and so forth, it's, and opportunities for different forms of housing to be age-friendly and things like that, and providing some diversity, and it all, that kind of fits. It's not something that you would see like a really reasonable challenge to. If you said, well, we'll zone the whole community for apartments, well, that's something altogether different. There's nothing saying that we're just gonna go high density in Lions Bay and change the basic character of the whole community.
Okay, well, let's nail down some of these decisions then. So what do we say around the table on augmenting the secondary suite allowance to allow detached secondary?
Detached means separate sewer, separate water, I take it. And carriage house would mean that you're not, it's not up and down
Same height.
duplex type of thing, it's
So-
gonna be a separate service and separate septic or whatever it happens to be, separate water supply, fire provision, all that kind of stuff, it's all a separate building now.
So basically what you're doing with the zoning at this point is, are you prepared to entertain the concept of a detached dwelling of some sort?
Council wouldn't have an opinion on this one because it's no subdivision application comes. This is just a building permit.
Well, it's the zoning though, you definitely have a.
Oh, we'd have to change the zone.
You would.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
We'd have to go to the new
And
zone.
you specify, and then the zoning itself does not guarantee that you can do this anywhere. You're
No, sure.
enabled, but you have to meet all the checklist of items, and two of the problematic ones are raised right off the top of everybody's head.
So then it's much like the laneway housing concept in the city of Vancouver, where you've got a residential lot that's been split into two, and they put a backyard house on, and the issues are gonna be pretty much identical.
what a laneway house could be a rental, or it could be a strata, a building strata.
Okay.
So that would be the way. It wouldn't be a conventional subdivision,
No.
because you need 2 acres. That's goes back to your zoning. So, but where a secondary suite under the building code cannot be subdivided, so you can't do a building strata with a secondary suite. If you have a separate dwelling, potentially you could.
You could sell it separately.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Because again, you'd be in all but 20 lots or so are vacant, or are developed, I should say.
And those 20,
so you'd be
18 are
involved-
undevelopable.
You'd technically be involved in a strata conversion. So again, if you're taking an existing house, and if you're building a laneway or a carriage house, and you want to be able to sell that, you've got to create a strata.
Yep.
And those types of approvals can be delegated to staff, or they can go to the council. And it depends on your,
So
kind of
if,
your real estate
if you're creating a bare land strata,
It's not a bare land.
Wouldn't it be? If,
No,
you,
it's
if
a
you've got a
building
carriage
strata.
house,
No, it's a building strata. It's like a condo. If you think of an apartment building and how each unit within a multi-story building is divided, it's the center line of the walls, it's the perimeter of the building that's actually the strata lot. The rest of the property is some form of common property.
yeah, I think we probably need to have a further discussion about the nuances and the legalities of going down that road.
Well, for now, though, I think
But conceptually,
I think we'd be more than prepared to bring it forward to say, are we looking at potentially being able to zone for detached secondary housing, let's call it. So let's just put that in your pipe and smoke it for now. In terms of other use, something that I've been mentioning for some time is hotel, boutique hotel type opportunity, specifically at the Works Yard. The current designation in the OCP is for multifamily, whatever that means. I think probably condo or apartment. But a higher and better use, and this is where I keep, who tells us what the highest and best use is? I don't know, if not you. But I certainly would like the opportunity for a developer to be able to contemplate putting a boutique hotel, hospitality, restaurant situation in designated places. Is that something, how does that then work?
Well,
I
first
doubt
of
we have
all-
a hotel zoning code right now.
that it's a somewhat complex question, because you would, like, assuming you have a place for your works yard to go.
Yeah, we do.
I mean, that's the first assumption, because you're
Yeah.
gonna need a
No,
works
assume
yard
that.
somewhere. Yeah, so if you assume that you've got an alternate at the Modi gravel area or something like that you'd be.
You guessed it.
I've done a little bit of research. At any time, you can entertain an application. So if someone came in tomorrow and walked into the office with a scheme, now you can say no. Like, if it's your land that they're after, you can say, no, we have no plans and we're not ready for this, whatever. But if they found, say, the lot 60 and 61, that might be problematic for traffic and a whole bunch of other things in a residential area, but someone could still, and I've seen it even for tax purposes, they want an official denial from a local government because Revenue Canada says there's potential. But you can entertain a rezoning application. And so if it was for a hotel, I'm pretty sure your community plan does not contemplate a hotel. And so then you would also package with the rezoning, you would have a community plan amendment, and you would treat both of those.
Do we not
together.
need the zone pre-packaged, or do we make up a new
No,
one?
in fact, you just don't really want to pre-zone any property.
Yeah, gotcha.
That's what it's called. In the old days, we kind of used to do that, but now it's gone so much further in the other direction, that you almost zone based on architectural plans. If you look at the North Shore, every zoning's got the footprint of the building because the neighbors' views are gonna be affected, or potentially, there's traffic, there's all these local issues that would have to be reconciled. And this is also to sort of step back into this density bonusing or community amenities. That becomes part of the discussion too, because you have these impacts that the community is going to bear. And so, well, is there offsetting sort of mitigation that a development can contribute something positive, as well as dealing with sort of their design so that view impacts are minimized, the siting of buildings and the servicing considerations and all that. So really you want to deal with anything like that, and this would go for that lot on lot 6061. You don't want to pre-zone that. You want to sort of set in place through your plan, which has already been done, that yes, this is a potential development opportunity. It's still sort of to be determined the extent of the opportunity, like how much development. The plan doesn't really say that about those two particular lots.
So you don't need to predefine a future use, not designated to a particular piece of land?
That's something, a community plan, like if there's sort of a desired need, or uses that the community's looking to encourage, and again, I'll go to give some real world examples. In Pemberton, they were trying to attract an international school as a destination boarding school that was international in scope. They saw that as an economic development opportunity, and we put the policies in place. They had the zoning. They didn't actually zone the land, but they had it ready to go. They had in their plan what they wanted to do, and that was what they were going to attract.
In their OCP plan?
Yeah, that's how you do something like that, is
Okay.
you put it in your OCP. And so then the zoning process is streamlined. You've already come to a general agreement in the community that this is desirable for the community. And then the zoning actually gives effect and deals with all the nuts and bolts and details of how do you actually operationalize this when you have a proposal in front of you.
Okay.
And I was just going to add that what we've got on this agenda, subject to time constraints, is a look at amending the development procedures application materials, or the bylaw that we currently have in place, so that we have more of a preliminary review process and we can flesh out the ideas as to what that development or any development might look like before it gets to the stage of applying for a rezoning. It's an opportunity to flesh that out and provide some feedback from the community and from us to any particular developer as to what things would be looked upon more favorably than others, and then take it from there and see how it evolves before they get to the stage of applying for a rezoning.
Yeah, okay, so the development permit process is where that sort of guidance
Well,
takes place.
that's not development permits. That's
It-
more or less
the
a
dev-
development application. So a development application is sort of a broad term which encompasses OCP amendments, rezoning amendments,
Yeah, no, I saw
or
the same.
subdivisions or so forth. So anybody who wants to do any of those things will be required under the scope of the amending bylaw to go through a review process and look at all the things that we're going to want them to look at before they even make the application.
For those of us around the table who don't live, sleep, eat, and breathe this stuff, this is kind of esoteric. DP areas, what the heck is that? So we're actually looking for guidance more. I think it's fair to say that for those of us, those four unwashed peons, what we do know is what the community needs, wants, thinks it wants, actually wants. Sometimes these are not quite the same thing. And so, we're looking for the framework under which we can provide that sort of input to provide for the future needs of the village, given the realities, the things that you identified, marijuana dispensaries, land values going through the ceiling. I'll just give you a foretaste of the discussion I had with BC Assessment. Lower mainland property assessments are going to go up between 25 and 50% this year. And I said, well, where's Lions Bay in that continuum? The guy said, well, I can't tell you exactly, but it may be at the high end of that scale. I mean, it's unprecedented. So, we are really going to, Lions Bay is changing under our feet, and we need to make provision for this. One more thing before I forget, Steve, the form and character stipulations. For some reason, these seem to take place in a zoning bylaw. Is that correct?
Not typically.
Oh,
So it's a development permit. So yeah, this can be esoteric, and the OCP is the high level plan that you've got. The future of your community. Then you work down to zoning, which is the regulations, the siting, and the uses that are permitted, the subdivision, lot sizes, and then right under that is probably development permits. And the development permits speak to a number of different matters. Form and character for commercial, industrial, multifamily residential, and what they call intensive residential. Lions Bay could probably qualify as intensive residential, and that gets into form and character. So
even for private houses.
it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen too many examples of that, but the Local Government Act, which is that really sets out the limits of what we're allowed to do. And they use this term intensive residential, and they don't define it. So I worked in a rural and sort of regional district context for my career. So when I see 5,000 square foot lots up to third, quarter acre, which is typical in Lions Bay, that looks intensive to me. And but it depends. The form and character. Some places take that to very sort of micro detail.
Whistler.
Yeah, Whistler. But
Squamish, downtown.
But it's kind of a design.
Yeah, I mean, just so for example, do we want our future sewage plant to look like this? Or a square concrete building? So this is in Burnaby. So somebody said, our sewage building is going to look like this. It's going to look nice. Not going to look like a shack. So how do we do this? No, I don't think we're going to build a sewage building like this. This is just a pump station, in fact. But that takes place in the development permit?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And then development permits, your building inspector told me that he requires a geotechnical analysis with pretty much every building permit. And oftentimes that he has the authority under the community charter to do that. But also you may have in your OCP guidelines around creeks, landslip areas. Actually, the ocean is the newest one. Like we've been dealing with a report from 2010 or 2011 for the Lower Mainland. It was on the news a week or two ago about how much it may cost the city of Vancouver to deal with False Creek with the sea level rise. And so with when you look at typical 50 to 80 year lifespan of a single family home on the water. I know on the Sunshine Coast again, we've just gone through our review of development permits, and with the sort of the storm surges that will normally occur, the aspect, the prevailing winds and so forth, there's a requirement for anything below, any development below 8.5 meters needs an assessment. And so much of the development permit areas around protection of natural environment features and protection against hazardous conditions, because the big difference between what the building inspector can call for and what a development permit does, and it's actually probably, I don't quite know all your mechanisms here yet on some of these issues, but under a development permit system, you can't alter land without a permit. So if you're working on steep or unstable slopes, the building inspector often doesn't get called in rural areas and small towns until somebody's ready to actually have their forms, or, you know, they're starting construction and ready for a permit. They've already cleared the property. And in a lot of cases, the damage is done by that time.
Well, we've had exactly that exact case here in Lions Bay, and we were sort of powerless to prevent the wrong sort of thing happening in Lions Bay.
Other than
it's
the
done.
property owner becomes liable in sort of under
I think
civil.
in this particular case he was within his rights. You know,
Yeah,
he cleared the land. He dug a big hole and poured a lot of concrete into it, and there was nothing we could really do about it. And that's why I talk about form and character. So, you know, we've ended up with sort of concrete siding and the wrong kind of roof and everything. We just can't let that happen again to protect people's investment in the community. I think you all know the one I'm referring to. It's on Bayview. So I imagine that actually goes back to my original question. Why do we not start from a clean sheet of a model bylaw rather than trying to shoehorn ours in? Because there's nothing special in Lions Bay other than the fact potentially that we're quite steep. Our properties are quarter acre lots, so that's suburban spacing, just not white picket fences, just trees. But around that, we're completely standard.
Well, I wouldn't say that, because we have, for instance, front yard averaging to protect views within Lions Bay, within the Lions Bay area. So that, you know, requires that if somebody's, you know, the setback would be based on, you know, if he's bought a lot in between two others, it's going to be based on where the existing housing already resides, so that he's not totally obliterating somebody else's view. So there's a number of things I think Steve would agree that are unique to Lions Bay, or more focused on Lions Bay, as opposed to, you know, if you take a model building bylaw, it's not going to have any of the considerations that have been, especially when a lot of the considerations are built around your secondary suite stuff that's already part of your zoning bylaw. So I think starting from scratch is probably not the right approach.
Okay, well,
but I don't know.
Do you agree with that, Steve?
Well, yes, I do. Short answer. And
Okay, good. That's all we need.
in a way, though, you're doing both on some levels. I mean, there's that old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Well, exactly.
So you've got 80%, 90% of your bylaw actually works. You know, there's a little finesse here and there.
I don't think it's ever been used.
The thing, you know, as times change, though, you still, there's sort of that be prepared type of aspect.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, to be prepared. I mean, dusting off a 40-year-old bylaw and hoping for the best.
So the other answer to the question is, you are opening it up anyway. If you're repealing two bylaws and replacing them with a new bylaw, it effectively is a brand new bylaw. It's just what you're saying is that we're not throwing everything out. We're actually identifying areas of the bylaw that we have issues with and need to be either updated, thrown out, or a few, like there's some specific new issues and things we want to deal with here, and you have a new bylaw. This will in fact be a brand new bylaw.
Okay, so let's get to the bottom line here. So you've given us the secondary suite. I think we've told you yes. I actually coincidentally, I had asked Peter for a report on our actual secondary suite experience in Lions Bay. And I don't recall the numbers offhand, but I suspect probably 10% of, no, I do. So 47 declared and inspected suites, of which 20 passed inspection and 27 failed inspection, or their remediation is not complete. So that's, the number is 47. What's council's opinion on how many secondary suites there are in Lions Bay, given your Pemberton experience, which I tend to agree with?
Pemberton's a lot different.
Well, I don't know. What do we think?
I have no idea.
I think we're probably double that, at least. I really do.
I don't know like Fred, but I suspect we're higher than that number.
Yeah.
I think, not counting the ones that are multiple secondary suites in the same dwelling, I would say we're up around 200, based on I don't know the 200 suites, but that's my sense. I think it's a lot. Which is why I was interested to hear that the way Pemberton does it is to assume everybody has one and fee accordingly, and then prove you don't to get a different. But is that a zoning issue, or is that a
That's
It's
more
not-
of
they-
a-
They've allowed secondary suites,
Yeah.
and Pemberton, Pemberton evolved as a bedroom community since the late 90s. It was the fastest growing community in BC. The high housing prices there meant that it was both hard to afford to buy a home, but there was also a lot of workers who needed housing seasonally and over a shorter term, maybe for a couple of years while they lived and worked in Whistler for a while when they're young. My block has cars everywhere. That's the kind of community we live
it's
in.
changed the nature of the community altogether?
Well, the community grew that way from scratch.
Okay, well, in Lions Bay, I would say we have exactly the same challenge. In order to afford a home here for your average Joe, they need every mortgage helper they can get. Our house prices here are, according to BC assessment, going through the roof. And we do have complaints about parking everywhere. There's places, Isleview is notorious. There's places there. I mean, Jim, you can probably count just in your head. There's probably 25 secondary suites, and in some cases multiple secondary suites, and you can tell just by the cars. So the point is, we do need to control the parking as part of our secondary suite thing. The only one of the options here that is not really viable is the transit one, because there is no transit. And what transit there is actually here. So, it's sort of
Actually, to be fair, the only other choice, which I'm sure would be unanimous, is the status quo.
well. So this is the reason that I find this report so interesting. It's the enforceability of any of these regulations. We can't even enforce our secondary suites bylaw, let alone the parking around it, because we don't know. So right now, people are parking here, there, and everywhere. It does need to be fixed. Some of that will be fixed by parking bylaw. But essentially, it's a free-for-all unless you're in a specific designated pay parking area. Otherwise, park where you can.
So you had alluded earlier to option 3, which is amend the siting regulations for parking uses and structures for secondary suites.
I like
so
that one. Why not?
So that would provide some set changes to the setback requirements for parking.
As long as so now,
And
does that
then-
include a pad or
Well, it talks about garage,
Is it pad or construction?
carport, or open air parking space. Although I don't know that an open air parking space would you actually even have to have a setback for a parking space. Is that normally something that you would have a setback for in a zoning bylaw? Maybe.
if you asphalt
so,
it and
actually,
put
yeah.
a light in there, is that setbackable?
If you just had a patch of gravel, in some bylaws, you'd have to look, but if there's no structure involved, like setbacks could be for uses, so the parking
Right.
area could have to be set back.
Yeah.
But typically, if it was a structure, you've got such sloping terrain here that you're gonna have to build up in some areas to.
Make a flat spot.
Yeah, that your building inspector would consider that a structure that may require a permit, but it might be open air parking.
Right. Okay.
In the other case, on the other side of the road, where if you were excavating into the hill and you'd need a retaining wall, and there may be some siting requirements around that,
Right.
but it's.
So then, if you have that as a sort of a consideration that seems to be perhaps suitable, and then what about option 4, where even though you've created more parking friendly rules around setbacks, you may still have situations where it's just not viable because of the particular site or circumstances. Do you want to provide for the opportunity for someone to make an application for a development variance permit to alter even those setback requirements so that you would have a different arrangement for that particular
Yeah,
site?
of course. Why not?
Well, and the property owner actually has that option.
Well, they have that right, don't they, under the
Yes.
Act? So they would have
But
that,
that
so you
is
don't
an
even,
option.
so is there anything you need to actually insert into the bylaw in order to
No.
create that up? Okay, so,
But just to be aware that, again, it becomes your attitude and approach to those types of applications which sets the tone.
Exactly, it's a tone thing.
Yeah.
Through the mayor, I think in terms of expediting our conversation here on this narrow piece, I think, in my view, it'd be fair to say amongst all of us that the status quo is just a no, which is option 6, so the big red line through that one. The TransLink option, very lovely and esoteric world, but not practical, so that's a no. Strong.
Well, except where it applies.
To
if it does.
the 3 people that live within.
But so I'll just mention to you that, we are talking about developable fixed route bus service, which means that buses will be,
It would be a Bear Lake pulse warm yes.
well, I mean, the point is that very soon, I'm not going to say to somebody that because the bus stops outside your house, you can't have a car. So from that
Well,
standpoint,
that's where I'm at too.
Yeah, I mean, are we
So
gonna say
what
that?
happens when Uncle Harry visits?
right, exactly.
Okay, so there we go.
No, you're actually saying that you don't need a car. Like if you had a nanny or something like that.
I'm not going to tell Lions Bays whether they need
No.
a car or not.
So-
They get to decide. They can have 3
Let
of
me
them.
accelerate this. So hard no on option 6, very fuzzy option 2, the rest are yeses.
Except I don't like licensing on-street parking. I believe that we don't charge people to park on their own street. Unless it's some kind of nominal
Within a
annual...
municipally owned thing, here, I presume that we're pushing into right-of-ways, parking in front of your own house doesn't seem like a
We
good
do
thing.
sort of charge, because right now, and the parking plan will say something similar, you get 2 free permits, and then other subsequent ones are $50.
The deal here is within sight lines and off the road, so I'm kind of a yes on this one.
so just a reminder as to how that presently works. Each taxpayer gets 2 free parking passes. If you're a resident, i.e. perhaps a secondary suite occupant,
Yeah.
you would have to come into the office and pay $40 for a resident parking permit. That doesn't allow you to park on the street non-stop. It only gives you the right to do so for 72 hours. So, it's not
Although, no.
currently something that, so whether or not you want to extend the right of a suite occupant to park for a longer period using that same, or would that require an additional?
Well, this is going
cost?
into the parking plan changes, which haven't even been proselytized yet, let alone decided. But my understanding is you can park anywhere in the village. You don't need a parking permit. You only need that in permit areas.
Right.
That's right.
And there are no real permit areas, because they're not so signed, which is when you...
Well, there are some signs.
It says
Yeah.
permit area, but nobody really, what's a permit? Before I forget, Steve, retaining walls. One of the big things that I have concern with in Lions Bay is that people build these 4-foot non-engineered retaining walls, but they build 5 of them to retain back a 30 or 40 foot slope. Is that a zoning issue, a building code issue, a building permit issue?
It's a bit of a zoning issue, but primarily it's a building code. And
See, I mean, so there's any number of examples in the village. People build these 4-foot or just under walls, which don't require engineering and even inspection, as it knocked me down with a feather to hear they don't even need inspection. And then they hold back a 40-foot slope with 10 of them.
so that's something that would, I'd have to defer to a building inspector on that for an interpretation. Because I've heard in some cases, they may consider a wall to be all part of the same wall under some circumstance, even if it's 4 feet and then there's a little bit step back. I'm not qualified to sort of make those distinctions.
But the question is, does it go in the zoning bylaw or somewhere else?
You often in the zoning bylaw just have, similar to fences, you would, if you go beyond a certain height right along the property line, that you're allowed a certain size of fence or wall within
Yeah,
the
this is
setback.
something. This is holding back a slope. So, for
Yeah.
example, the one that we're all thinking of, the one on Bayview near the school, that was uninspected. Didn't need inspection, and it's holding back a 40-foot slope.
So maybe something like that gets covered off with a steep slope development permit,
It would.
if you had
Yeah,
such a thing.
But, and I guess it depends as.
Now that's
whether
unique to
you're-
Lions Bay.
It depends whether your building inspector is actually calling for building permits for those retaining walls.
He's not.
But is it not dependent upon the building code and the bylaws surrounding, anything locally surrounding that, because I would think that when it's being looked at for permitting to do something like that, that Dave would have something to say about that, about geotechnical assessment. So I don't know,
Dave tells me he does not inspect walls under 4 feet. Meaning no plans, no nothing, no engineering.
Well, under 4 feet.
I don't think it was
One.
contemplated to have 5 of them.
Yeah, so they're all under 4
but,
feet.
but again, that falls, that's the situation that falls directly under the, either the building code or the requirement for geotechnical assessment to sustain the building that's sitting up on top of that slope. No matter what, we've got a couple of them down below Low Village here where for a while it was like one of the houses was gonna be sliding down the cliff until they got an engineer in there and decided to do some shotcreting and build proper walls in
Okay,
there.
well that's all I need to know is, does that go in a zoning bylaw? In which case, I want it in this one, or the ability to do it, or not.
I'll do some further research to give you more.
Okay. So have we given you enough to go on the secondary suite? That seemed to be the thing that exercises us most, and the parking around that. What other main issues? Form and function, or what do we call it? Form and character. Do you know
Well,
that we don't
that-
touch
you
in
can
zoning?
Park that for now.
Fine, good.
The carriage house, is that's something
I
that
think-
I heard some.
Yeah,
It's
make
something I think you and I need to talk about that a little bit further too, in
Well, I
terms
think-
of the
so
legalities of.
Maybe it's a good time to sort of talk about what I'm planning on doing
Yeah.
next year, because there are there's some additional items that are, we've touched on them that haven't really gotten direction. I think I know where you're going on the marijuana, short-term rentals and so forth, so that's.
Well, let's talk about short-term rentals.
Actually, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's
So I
give-
think you will find some diversity of opinion, even around this table, in terms of whether we want or don't want Airbnb type rentals.
Mhm.
So our options are either we allow them or we don't allow them, or because again we have no ability to police. So we don't have a bylaw inspector, but 3 months of the year. We have to write stuff that works without inspection.
Well, something like that, you don't necessarily have to go on the property, you just go on the internet.
So you've done that recently. How many Airbnbs come up when you
I
talk?
haven't done that recently.
The one day I didn't bring my
And
machine.
that's gonna get word of mouth around. I mean, there's always a way around the wall. So whether it's, call it whatever it is, it's short-term rental. Airbnb just happens to be the flavor of the moment.
Sure.
So the example I would put towards council is 2 that I can think of. One which happens to be on my street where an absentee owner gets north of 10 grand a week for his house. And people come to ride bikes, do the Grand Fondo, they're European, the money's not an object, everybody's a winner, very antiseptic, all that kind of stuff.
No skin off anybody's nose in the neighborhood.
No, they're not creating more garbage, not flushing more, you get the whole drill. Second one, that from time to time we get a complaint from a quasi-hotel-like operation in Kelvin Grove, where is it a short-term rental or does it just revolve every 3 weeks or something like that? And so the neighbors complain because there's noise, there's garbage, there's cars, blah, 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 blah. Antiseptically, the 2 are the same.
Yeah.
So to my
And what about
council
B and
colleagues-
Bs? People running. There's at least 4 in Lions Bay. That's running a business in an RS1 zone, B and B business. Technically not allowed, even today, correct? Not that we have the ability to inspect or not. So do we need to allow that, or do we just continue to look the other way, or do we explicitly ban it? And if so, why? I think one of the many ethoses of Lions Bay is you don't really want to interfere in people's lives. You're not going to tell them how many cars they can have. You're not going to tell them what they can and can't do in the house as long as it doesn't bother anybody else. So, whether that needs to be formalized or not is another question. That's all very well until it goes bad. And then...
Well, it's not just the rental gone bad, it's the opposite side of the coin. And the community planning aspect of the whole issue is by allowing it, you are perhaps reducing, if not eliminating, the small number of properties which might otherwise be available for monthly rentals for those who need monthly rentals, whether it's volunteer firefighters who are doing their stuff on behalf of Lions Bay and have nowhere else to live, or others who can't afford to live in a rapidly escalating property value community. You may find that you have more need for rental housing, which you have none of at the moment. You have no rental housing complexes or anything like that. So people who need to rent housing or accommodation on a monthly, long-term basis, if you allow that stock to be sold on a short-term basis, then you're displacing those people.
Well,
How
I mean-
many there are, I have no idea. But
There's
it's
no
something you need
properties
to think
available
about.
for rent. Oh, well, I think there's 3 currently rented. I personally was a recipient. The first 2 houses I lived in Lions Bay, we rented. So, thank goodness they were there, and they were very hard to find, and I just got lucky both times. So, yeah, I fully understand the reason. I moved here for the right reason. I needed long-term rental accommodation. So, yeah, I mean, we certainly need to, I think, make provision for that. I think we need to consult with the community as to, a lot of people's business model revolves around, the actual home ownership model, or more revolves around short-term rentals.
Well, one thought is that if you regulate it in the draft bylaw and then take it out for public consultation, then you can find out what does the
The
community
demand, yeah.
say about it. If you don't have anything in there, then you're not really inviting that feedback. So that's why I started with the premise in the terms of reference that it wouldn't be allowed, but it says not subject to council and public feedback. That's the idea. So you say no, and then you just seek the public feedback and see what they say, and then you can decide from there.
I'll just interject now. I mean, I think Lions Bay would see that as unwarranted government interference.
I guess you don't know until you ask, though.
I think
Okay.
I think I'm pretty clear. That's what they would say.
I think that there's extreme circumstances. I know of the one in Kelvin Grove, where it's essentially rent a bedroom for a night. That's really what it is. And there's 6 bedrooms in the house, if I remember correctly.
Well, at least it's not hourly, right?
No, but that.
Fred gets it immediately.
But the whole point is, the neighbors on that street are really disadvantaged by that process, and they have a legitimate, I feel they have a legitimate concern. So we have to be careful around.
Well, this may be one of the
that type
brave
thing.
decisions we have to make.
Well,
Ron,
the other
keep
thing-
interrupting.
Yes, I think it is, but I think not everybody's, let's get everybody on the same page, especially Steve on this one too.
Yeah.
The other one, and I don't want to pave ground on this, but City of Vancouver is about to with their absentee home issue. And if you were lucky enough to look at with the Metro the other day with its little bobbles and blows showing the straight line of how it goes to, which is nice and easy. My thinking here is council may want to think about this, whether we want that in. I like the idea of the revenue. I like the idea that homes are occupied, and if they're not occupied, and this is kind of I would consider additional tax the City of Vancouver is thinking about. However, unlike the City of Vancouver, I'd rather do it the declaration way, and we just assess you. And
Well, this is not a zoning issue, the unoccupied home tax, and I would be very against doing anything like that. It's my house. Don't tell me what I have to do with it. If I choose to leave it empty, that's my thing. But it's not a zoning issue, so it's not part of this discussion, I think.
No, I think the bed and breakfast versus the short-term rentals is a zoning issue.
Yeah.
And essentially, most places do provide for bed and breakfast. And the primary difference is that, because a lot of B&Bs now don't actually provide the second B, they don't provide the food, but they
Yeah.
provide, but it is resident managed. And that's one of the differences, because if you have a vacant unit, if you think about it, whether it's a house or a small cottage or something, basically what you've got there is a commercial use as opposed to a residential use. If all you're doing is renting it out on a nightly basis, what's the difference between that? It's a 1-unit hotel.
Yeah.
And it's commercial, not residential. And so that's probably the starting point for the discussion of regulation then on on what basis would you regulate? I've been through this discussion before, and ultimately it came down to we're not going to put it in the bylaw, we're just gonna act on complaints. Because what we had was in a couple of places, we've had the party house scenario where the owner is in either California or somewhere else, but certainly it was difficult to get any kind of compliance. But what we looked at was our noise bylaw as noise infractions as opposed to use infractions. If you want short-term rentals, and that's what the community wants, and it should be explicitly permitted in the zoning and with any conditions that you deem appropriate that are attached to that.
Such as can't do it in a secondary suite, or if that's something that you choose to restrict,
Yeah, well, yeah.
or you have to rent the whole house, or you can't just rent by the room, or what? I mean, you could go through any number of restrictions or possibilities for restrictions or none.
Yeah, I mean, this is not a simple thing. So, for example, take me, I have a secondary suite unoccupied. It was for my father-in-law. I certainly don't want to rent it on a permanent basis, but I wouldn't mind picking and choosing some Airbnb clients to come in. Maybe they'd be interesting, I don't know. I'm not saying that's what I'm going to do. There's different kinds of Airbnb-ing as well.
Mm-hmm.
And this may, I mean, I'm not averse to the approach, do nothing and listen for screams, if that is a viable opportunity, a viable approach. Don't know. So you have to think about this.
I think you need to take this one away.
Mm-hmm.
Let us know when you've solved the problem.
Okay, put it in writing too.
Well, turn it into a bylaw. Should be easy.
I like the idea of having the seed planted in the, in the OCP, saying, there's potential for this
Yeah,
idea
that
here.
may be the way to
And
go.
That might be the best way to go with that kind of stuff, because right now, we may not want to cross that bridge, but
Well,
eventually we might have to.
It's hard pioneering when you're doing it up front.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah, we don't. I don't really know what the village's reaction would be to allowing or not allowing
I think it's
Airbnb.
changing as time goes on. I think as the house prices go up, things are gonna change.
Yeah.
And then people is gonna have they're gonna have different ideas about what they shouldn't do.
Now, what about other uses of property contrary to its zoning? Egregious, obvious uses that are not, in most cases, currently in Lions Bay RS1. Does the zoning bylaw give us opportunity to change that? Is that a building permit issue? Is it a DP issue? No, not a DP issue. How do we, for example, somebody running
concrete mixing operation.
an aggregate business? This is just an example, no specific case in mind.
No, not at all.
Because obviously we don't want to be singling anybody out. This is a catch-all that we're looking for here. Is that something that you solve with a tightened up zoning bylaw?
Well, unless you're,
Or a heavy truck repair business.
well,
For
yeah,
example.
we had, when I worked in Pemberton area for Squamish-Lillooet Regional District, when I first got there, they had a guy, he actually ended up on council too for quite a while.
No
He
conflict
was-
of interest, I'm
He
sure.
was running a concrete business. He had a ready mix going in an R1 zone, and the bylaw was strong enough in that case that ultimately it was the regional district hadn't enforced its bylaws, and in fact I was told that they just coach people to just do what they wanted because we don't enforce our bylaws. And my perspective on that is we don't need the rules if there's something we have
Absolutely.
no intention whatsoever. Because you run into people, and there are people who observe the rules. And to penalize them because they don't want to break the rules is just out and out wrong. That's a fundamental kind of with me.
Well, certainly I feel
So you probably got a bylaw, and all bylaws tend to work on the premise that you list the permitted uses, and there's wording to the effect that all other uses are prohibited in that zone. So that's the way bylaws basically work. So somebody said, well, it doesn't say that I can't do this. Well, that's irrelevant because it's specifically.
Says what you can do.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so
then
in this
it
particular
becomes-
case, our bylaw is clearly not strong enough or correctly worded enough, because it's a situation that's well understood, and we're powerless to change it. So either we can't use the zoning, either we have to tighten up the zoning bylaw to make sure this situation doesn't happen. As Ron says, there's a guy, well, we won't point at any specific spots on the map, there's a guy running two car repair businesses, one in Brunswick, one in Lions Bay. There's a guy running a glass blowing kiln. He's had 2 house fires already in his RS1 house, and I'm sure there's others that I can't think of off the top of my head.
So ultimately, and this is the question that is the real tough one, is that for a community you have to look at is the problem bad enough, and has it persisted long enough, is it impacting enough people in whatever way that you cross that threshold, because every village pretty much that I'm aware of has real tight budgets. And you're gonna have to, the bottom line is you have to take somebody to court ultimately. And again, my personal experience in Pemberton, it was the Wild West, and there was a guy who was doing furniture manufacturing on a farm in the agricultural land reserve. He had 15 employees, he had a great business, it was in the wrong location. There was a concrete plant, then there was another guy who had a big pile of dirt. Right next to a really nice log house, he had a 40-foot pile of dirt, he had trucks, and it was a real nuisance. And those 3 were prosecuted essentially at the same time.
Against the zoning bylaw.
It was there was zoning, and the regional district finally sucked it up and said enough is enough. This has gone too far, and we need to start enforcing our bylaws in this case. And so they took one guy, shut down his business. The cement guy went to court, and finally there was a consent order. He conceded because the bluffs, he called the municipality's bluff all the way, and we just went through another one over on the Sunshine Coast like that, where the bluff was called all the way until the court date was scheduled. Then the person folded because black and white, they were contrary to the bylaw. They were just testing the municipality's resolve. And the community in each of these cases stands behind the municipality and says, do something about this. Once you do it, it does send a message, at least for a certain time, that the bylaws are there and they're not just worth the paper they're written on.
Okay, well, you can deal with Peter on this one. My understanding is our bylaw doesn't even give us that opportunity.
Well, if that's the case, that's probably why I'm here rewriting your bylaw for you.
I think you can take that for granted, yes.
I think it'd be fair enough, in the spirit of moving on, that this is another takeaway for you, because I think this is dear to everybody.
I believe that's in the terms of reference, is it not, Peter?
Yeah,
The
it is.
specific instance, yeah.
Good.
So,
And thank you for all those good examples.
I agree.
Yeah, I think the terms of reference, if you can execute on those, I think we'll be 99.9% of the way there. The terms of reference are great.
And for Carl to say that, that saved 3 hours.
I thought you might flag that.
okay.
So, does that give you enough to be going on?
Yes, I'd like to, because what I'll do is I'll bring back the next work package. I'll talk with Peter on how far we go with that. And then, because I would like to run like all the major issues by the council and then take it sort of into the broader public, because I don't want to be doing any work that hasn't been
Yeah, I think
put
that's
on
smart.
this table first, and then once it goes public, like the issues like short-term rentals and so forth, those are on the table. There may be other things that come up that can be addressed within the scope of this.
Well, technically it is now public. This is a public meeting, and if anybody took the trouble to listen to the recording, they would know. But yeah, so we certainly want to present this to the community in a way that they get to understand the issues and I wouldn't say necessarily make a choice, because I believe this is council's choice, but we would reflect the community's will. So let's go with exactly that approach as you suggest. So the next time we will see something from you is just prior to January
Second
20.
meeting of December,
That's what I'm hoping to do.
a
think
little
it's-
pre-Christmas reading.
I think it's first meeting in December, isn't it? Or no, that's only,
Oh,
that's our next
yeah,
meeting.
that's gonna be-
Yeah, no, that's not gonna work.
For the
December
pass for the first one, Carl's a big
So,
part of this,
yeah,
and
yeah.
he's gotta be here.
Yeah, so, December 20th,
Oh, so that quicker turnaround. Okay, that's good.
Okay,
if that's doable.
Well, can we talk?
Yeah, we'll talk about it. Otherwise, yeah, if it's not, then we'll just push it.
hmm
But
I mean,
We
you're
wanna-
still on track for a sort of a late February delivery of a zoning bylaw?
Yeah, if I can get a draft done by the end of the year.
Oh, you think you'll have a draft by then, hey?
well, for
Okay.
public
Well, I
consult,
think-
to take to the public. to
Okay,
that
so the
stage.
consultation document.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, am I getting ahead of myself to wonder if you would be the guy that would then help us potentially on the OCP?
That's something to be discussed.
Yeah, I'm assuming all the discussion takes place. I mean, do these things naturally, I used the term leapfrog before, do these things leapfrog or should they be put in place together or what?
These are two separate things, I think.
Okay, yeah, as you have explained twice, in fact.
Carl, your parking plan, I'm not sure whether it's coming as a recommendation or data or whatever it is.
Recommendation, yeah.
How does that feed into what we don't know what Steve's going to suggest? Can you
Yeah,
get
good
that to him
question.
Sooner, and, I mean, it's kind of a bit of a catch-22 here.
It is a little bit. I'll send it out pretty soon. I've just got a few more tweaks to do to the version that exists today. And then Peter, you can decide whether to send it on to Steve or not. For him to, whether there's a zoning issue in there or not, I don't know, but I don't think so. Other than how I think it's fair to say that most Lions Bayers would prefer less government interference than more. So in terms of regulating parking in much of the village, there is no regulation. Other than something like a standard parking, two wheels off the tarmac or something like that. But, that's not a zoning issue again.
Pushing the agenda to the max, just thinking out loud, if you, not the current agenda, this agenda.
I was going to say, how
parking, if you were to have that to council for the first meeting in December, even though you'd be absent, we'd see what the thread of it was. And we could probably, with hands up, whether it be quorum, even with the rookie.
Would the rookie be in there then?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It should be named, or is she? She'd be named, so the first time out.
Yeah.
Then we'd be able to give firm direction to Steve.
Okay, fine. So I will send that
If
out.
that works for you, Peter.
Well, I think just send it around
I'll just send it around.
to begin with, and
I've got a
let's-
day or two's work
And
to do.
I can have a look and work with Steve,
Well,
and we'll
we're
see where
going
everything
into
I can plan
acceleration
on, see
mode
what.
here, which is
Fine.
good.
Yeah, that's good idea. Okay.
All right. Well done.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Just check my notes at the back here.
Good conversation.
Yeah, enjoyed that free parking for the last time.
Yeah.
I'll go for the staff
Unless you
pass.
bring your stroller.
Good. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks,
Okay,
Dave.
thank you.
So we'll see you same place, same channel in about a month,
Yes.
approx. Fantastic. Okay, so apologize, but I think this is going to be one of the more important sort of legislative pieces we do. I think so. I think it behooves us to discuss it in some detail, just to get the experts going straight. Thanks, Steve. Have a good one. See you. Okay, so we'll move on.
Good work, Peter, too.
Let's see. Where we got?
49.
Turn to the actual agenda. I think we've got.
One will be talking about the development applications procedure fee bylaw, if at all, and then the proposed amendments to the fees bylaw.
Why don't we do the fee bylaw stuff first?
Okay.
And then,
Oh, yeah.
because the other one's going to get kicked upstairs for this evening, anyways.
Anyway, yeah, we can discuss it then.
We can have a brief. Whatever
Does it-
time we've got left, we can have a
I
very.
mean, I had a few questions with
And
the
then-
sense of Peter. He said he didn't want to discuss it much, so I took him at his word, and he's responded to me. I mean, the main things I wanted to hear is how do we take care of all this stuff, and that's through development permit areas. Okay, so I get the answer. Did anybody else have anything on this development permit bylaw that we're going to give? It's essentially, Peter, it's a stopgap measure to allow us to
Todd.
put the rest of our ducks in a row.
I think we're gonna skip it down to,
No, I'm thinking maybe we can drop it altogether, but okay, we'll skip it tonight.
yeah, so that's.
Okay, so fees
So
bylaw.
maybe a motion to consider 8C ahead of 8B.
I see a motion and a second, all in favor and opposed. Anybody object to changing the order? Motion carried. So Pam, it's yours, I believe, 49 page.
It's sort of mine and the CAO's. Essentially, it's our fees and charges bylaw. We've seen it for the first and second reading, and then that was prior to our new CIO, Peter, starting, so we sort of put it on hold. Essentially, it's my understanding, we really didn't even have a fees and charges bylaw till about 2010, and this is the first substantive look we've had at it since then. So it may look like we're making radical changes. A normal process would be, we just look at it every year, look at inflationary concerns, compare to other municipalities. But in this case, we just looked at it top to bottom. So, and we're making, strong recommendations based on, we worked closely with our building inspector, and I have some comparison in here, but we looked at what other municipalities did. Some of them are tweaked just on what the cost now is, and that was particular, the building inspector's time, public works time to go out to calls. That's just based on what it actually costs us. And so sort of a variety of, we looked at a variety of different ways to examine the fees, but this is essentially staff's recommendation for the council's review.
Okay, thanks. That was in fact my first question. Did we not review this within the last year? But you say we tabled it.
And initially, we just had some preliminary changes. We just tweaked a few, some of the room rentals, and we didn't look at anything else. The idea was we'd get that passed, and we'd look at it again this year once we had a CAO
okay.
on board. But since we
that's
didn't
that.
even get that far, we've now skipped that step, and we've taken the same bylaw that you initially saw for first and second reading that had minor changes.
Yeah.
And now we've just morphed it into looking at it all together to go to
we
third reading
never
and
passed
then
that bylaw?
adoption. No, just went to first and second reading, and there were minor changes.
Yeah,
So this
okay.
is sort of the same version you're seeing with much more substantive
Yeah, good,
changes to
okay.
it.
So this is a substantial staff recommendation, is what you're saying?
Well, just about everything's changed, yeah. So, comments?
For me, the only one which is, I'm fine with all of this in terms of bringing everything to a more current financial number. The one for me, which is on page 53 of 68, which would be the building permit renewals, which ties into the one sheet here.
Analysis.
The analysis, thank you, is that the middle block on page 53 of 68, page 10 of this report, says 2-year building permits. Then the middle strata, which is for renewal after 2 years, is 25% of building permit fee, minimum $500. I'm wondering why we would reduce the fee and not increase the fee if the idea is to accelerate the construction, and I would actually go the reverse.
200%, yeah.
I'd go 200%,
Yeah.
and that would accelerate the construction and conclusion of the project.
Yeah.
Which then would get into my sense of the analysis, is if I look at the page that Pam has here with with lots of room, and Lions Bay is the thriftiest place to build a place, I'm thinking for the few houses that we do, and they're all multi-million-dollar homes, why aren't we the highest?
So comment about the renewals, they're currently $100. So this would be minimum $500, and if it's a $10,000 building permit fee, because it's a really nice big house, then that's going to be
$20,000.
$2,500 renewal. So
Yeah.
it's going up a lot. It's not.
No, I'm totally with Ron.
I think
No, I know.
I'm still going north.
I wrote premature here because we don't actually know what the guidelines are going to be in terms of trying to force or reduce abuse of the building permit system to allow ongoing.
I can
That's
also
right.
think of the last 4 homes that have been built in the village. They're all, construction costs are well north of $1 million. And they were pretty lickety split with one exception, which had a smaller one. And I think that, for the reasons that I said, that it accelerates the process, and let's cut to the quick, it's also a cash grab too, but if
Forget
the
about it, yeah.
opportunities are so few,
This is to force you to get on with it. You've got 2 years. If you can't do it in 2 years, it's going to cost you.
I think,
So maybe it's not 2 years, maybe it's 3 years.
yeah,
but-
we did talk to the, Peter, the building inspector about that we have to be careful. I mean, there's certain situations we want to use it for, but in general, 2 years can be kind of tight. Sometimes people just run out of money, and we don't want to be punitive. That was part of it. That I think people genuinely want to get it done, and things can happen. Sometimes there can just be trouble even getting. You get the building permit, but you can't start construction because of weather to a certain extent. So although 2 years does seem like a long time, that was just because I'd asked the building inspector the
Okay,
same
well,
thing.
that being said, I could go to
it's,
3 years instead of 2, but then the hammer drops.
So, but is that then a building bylaw issue? 3 years instead of 2? What is it that says the permit is valid for 2 years?
The building bylaw.
The building bylaw.
Mhm.
So that would require a building bylaw amendment, and as you saw in my thing, I've got a substantial amount of things I'd like to see in a new building bylaw.
Mhm. Well, just as a heads up, I don't want to get into it right now, but I mean, there's a new building act which is being phased in.
And there's also all
by
that,
December, and also our lawyers have had joined forces with Municipal Insurance Association, and they're putting out a model building bylaw for their clients, including us. So we'd have the ability to use that.
I'm sure they won't leave anything out.
In any event, it'd be a great start, and it'd give us a leg up.
Of course.
on
So
moving
the point is, we're not going to do
forward,
the building bylaw just
so
yet.
not right now.
Um,
So I think we leave it at 2 years.
Yeah, we don't have an
and-
option. So now the case is,
Right.
what should the fee be?
And I think another point too is we're not locking this in for the next 10 years. The other thing I should have added is now as part of our regular budget process, we will revisit this every September. We'll bring it forward with minor tweaks. And so if whatever you agree on now, you're not locked into it forever. This will come up every year for renewal. You can see what's working, what's not.
Yeah. What is the basis for charging a building permit fee in the first place?
Well, the basis with respect to all these fees is cost recovery.
Cost
So
recovery.
that's
Building
the
inspector's time.
legislative principle. So it's
Yeah.
not intended to be punitive or cash grab. It's cost recovery is the overriding principle.
So a renewal, there is no real extra something, although the building inspector is going there.
It's continued, the building inspector
It's
has to
ongoing,
continue to do
yeah.
ongoing.
The cost of the building inspection is completely ongoing. It's gonna continue until the project.
So why not just the same, 100%?
Well, I think to Ron's point, I don't think it's punitive so much, but more incentivizing the client. If they want them to get going.
Yeah, it's not going to solve some of our situations. It's not the solution to an abuse of the building permit system. But
This was one that we had actually seen. I forget which municipality had something like this.
Yes.
But,
Sure, I'd like
Yeah.
to hear from our other 2 colleagues on this one to let staff noodle on this. It's the first time you said something in an hour and a half, keep going, you're on a roll.
Oh, my voice is gonna go hoarse.
yeah, you've got to stop talking so much.
What was I? Yeah, I would say, 500 is chicken feed when you're building a house. It's not much of an incentive to get on with it, so.
That's the minimum, it's 25% of what fee you paid, but a minimum of 500. Yeah,
I
but-
wanna go 50% even.
Yeah.
How's that?
Mhm.
even though you may have paid $8,000 for your building permit already 2 years
On your $1
ago.
million house, it continues to be chicken feed. Another 8,000
Most
or
people
another.
are pretty keen to get on with it.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that 2 years might not be enough time to finish your big house.
I'll go with that one too.
Yeah,
I'd go
but that's a building bylaw issue that we're not going to be able to address for a while.
Or
So
should-
maybe as a stopgap.
Could we put in a provision there that it could be appealed based on harsh circumstances? I mean, if you knew that there was, say for example, a municipality was making a requirement on it that required them to exceed the 2 years, then they shouldn't be penalized for that.
It could be weather too, as Pam says. I mean, it's just weird crap happens. I'll buy that.
Yeah.
It's not really the type of thing that for which you apply for a variance. And so technically it would require an amendment of a bylaw, which you don't want to have to do every time. But yeah. I'm not
We
sure.
need to consider a few other things in this as well. And that is that the inconvenience to the neighbors, to people, that's what's driving some of the stuff that we have, issues we have nowadays.
Yeah.
And the thing is that the incentive needs to be there. But I look at this and I look at the fees and I'm looking at 25%, I'm thinking, that's a pretty good jump, okay? For an extension of a building permit, and 2 years is reasonable. I don't care, if the guy's building it by himself or hiring a carpenter to do the work and he's got the shell up and he's moved into it, then that's a whole different issue. But the reality is if it's ongoing construction for more than 2 years, It's a significant issue. I mean, most of the properties most of the houses in British properties don't take that long to build. They
No,
go
because
up-
time is money in that case. The developer is going to get on with it. He wants them sold. In fact, he probably pre-sold them. Yeah, I don't know if the building permit fee is the mechanism by which we encourage or accelerate. I mean, as you know, I really want to encourage on some of these new development opportunities, accelerated development. Whether that takes place within the fee or some building bylaw change, I don't know. With some substantial penalties for not completing when you said. But in terms of individual, some guy buys a property, knocks down the house, and now wants to build a new house, and it took him more than 2 years. What must he now pay? Let's say it's through no particular fault of his own, weather or supplier or.
So the issue becomes, is this fee here increased good enough?
There's no increase. This is 25% of
Yeah.
what he paid before.
It's a good increase.
It's not an increase.
It's
No,
an
it's
increase
more-
over the $100 that's currently
You
Oh,
charged.
currently
yeah, well,
charge
$100 was a joke.
Okay, so also the other thing just to keep in mind is most building permits are for not new construction but renovations,
Yeah.
and they range from 10,000 or whatever
Yeah.
to
And so in most
Whatever.
cases, you will never
Yeah.
be asking for a renewal because you'll have finished it within 3 months, 6 months.
could be.
So this is
So-
where the house opposite the school, the roundhouse, which has been ongoing for 10 years, inconveniencing everybody in Lions Bay, more or less, because of the stuff that washes down and blah, blah, blah. How would we incentivize that guy to finish once and for all? Through the building permit? No, there's going to be something far more substantive than that.
It would contribute.
It would, it may be, it may be. Right now, there's a $100 every 2-year penalty for not having finished. That's no penalty at all. Maybe there's a penalty later, I don't know.
But the point is that it's fees and services
Yeah.
to cover
Yeah.
cost.
So that
the
is a
village
valid
bears. And that means that we have to cover the cost of ongoing inspection and stuff like that.
In 2 years, everything starts again as far as I'm
That's right.
concerned.
So, but the thing is that, so this is,
I would say it's just the same, 100%.
Yeah, I suggest we've had a conversation, we come back tonight.
You don't, but you want readings on this, do you not?
No.
No,
No, oh, you don't,
but we
okay.
want to be able to go to third reading at the
We-
next meeting on December 6th. So
Third
we-
reading, so
we're
you're going to do
asking
3 readings
for-
at a time?
No, we've already
It's on
Done the
tonight.
first two.
already had 2 readings.
we've only had.
A year ago.
Oh, and so, okay, got it. Okay, so
It's
this
hard
is
to
the
remember.
changes for the third
Yes.
reading. Okay,
Yeah.
got you.
Yeah.
A bit of a gap.
So just, we're looking for some direction so
Direction
that
towards-
we can.
Okay, I think you've got your direction.
Let's
If I'm,
jump
I think council wants to see a higher fee.
Wait, which we're suggesting 25, so our direction from council is what percentage would you like to see for the fee?
If we're trying to incentivize, get people to have an incentive to complete, then yeah, I think that the fee needs to be more substantial. I would agree with that.
Okay, Fred?
I agree with that too. To me, it's between 50 and 100%.
Same.
Yeah, so I'm the same with the proviso that is that the mechanism to incentivize people to finish? So
I
I'll
think
take
it's
your
probably
advice on that.
Just one of
Several.
a few.
Yeah.
Arrows in the
Probably
quiver, yeah.
So it'd be
There's a
one-
couple
one
of
thing.
them at least, if not more.
Okay, well, so somewhere between 50 and 100 is 75%. How do we feel about that?
It's not that now you're deciding anything tonight, but you're
Yeah.
giving us some direction. So I think we have a
You got enough
idea,
direction there?
Enough
Enough
direction
Okay, good.
to go back and come back with something.
We think it needs to be more substantial.
And for me, the rest of the things are fine.
Okay, thanks, Ron.
Take one from you.
What about the rest of you?
I got a couple here.
Yep.
I'll try to be quick. This one's been popping up a lot on page 58 of 68 or page 15 of this. Bottom right, bottom left corner, operating a vehicle or combination of vehicles in excess of 63,500 kilograms licensed gross vehicle weight on a highway. There won't be any vehicles licensed that high.
Yeah.
That is, what did I figure it out to be? That's 139,993 pounds. A highway semi-trailer.
It's 30 tons, yeah.
A highway semi-trailer runs in about 80,000
Yeah.
for a fully loaded. Like a fully loaded log truck on the highway is an 80,000 GVW, and if an off-highway one is 100 to 120.
This comes from a highways bylaw, which is also wrong. So Dave Shore has pointed that out many times in his objections. So that number is just wrong. Again, I think it was probably a conversion issue. They multiplied by the factor instead of divided, or who knows.
So
They
again,
are
that would
saying
be
vehicle or combination of vehicles, so I envision that as well. I'm not disagreeing, but if you need 5 trucks going to your property, it would take the combined weight of all 5 trucks.
Oh, I thought they meant a
It
combination,
says,
like
or
a truck and
combination
I
of
thought
vehicles.
a truck and
Oh, if it's a
trailer.
licensed
Oh,
gross vehicle
yes,
weight.
that's what they're talking about,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
No, no, it's,
Trailer?
yeah, it's
Do you think it's just a truck and
a
a trailer?
10-ton truck.
Okay.
There's 2,000 pounds in a long ton. That's 20,000 pounds. It's a 10-ton truck. The problem is, how do we enforce that? Why do we even have it?
And who's weighing it?
Who's doing it? I think your truck weighs 63,502 kilograms. So, no, it doesn't.
Well, even if it did, $35.
No. Well, so the point is, I was glad to hear Steve say don't have stuff that you can't enforce or don't intend to enforce. So that's more my question on that one.
Well, I think it makes us all look ridiculous with that number there.
The number's wrong. Yeah,
We just
plain
don't know
wrong.
what we're talking about
Yeah.
with that number
Yeah,
there.
so
I-
that's coming straight out of the traffic and parking bylaw.
Yeah.
So that would require an amendment of that bylaw.
Yeah.
Do we want to, in the interim, pending any such amendment of that bylaw, do we want to just leave the fee alone and come back to it when we amend the bylaw? Or do we want to plug in a different number, or what do we want to do?
Or take it out.
Or take it out completely.
Amend the bylaw and take it out then.
We're not going to enforce. We cannot enforce this fee.
No.
Right.
Okay, so take it
I
out?
think
I'd say take it
the
out.
Take it
enforce- Or just keep it the way it is. So he's
No,
saying-
I don't want stupid stuff in our bylaws
Okay.
because then people lose respect for the
Because
whole
in terms
thing.
of the enforcement, I can check, but I think the companies who do this are aware of this and they come in and they pay. I can check on that.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it's
Like,
it's
two
an honor
separate
system
things.
thing.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to keep it in terms of, I think we
The
do,
only one
I'll
I
double
can
check,
think
but
of
we do
that
get
comes in
revenue
on, that
from it.
guy's got, a resident has got a big boulder that he's, I think they're really dealing with the village on, and they had a big tree a couple of years ago. So, I mean, basically the road's closed as the big, crane comes in,
Oh, acre.
yeah, and does the whole thing, well.
Yeah, yeah. That is an inconvenience. That should
one
be
might
paid.
be in the ballpark.
I mean, you know, we should also. That's actually a good point, and this actually allows us to address specific situations in certain cases. I mean, what is the idea here? Is that is it a 10-ton truck has to pay a fee, or is it bigger than a 10-ton? A 10-ton truck is sort of the normal dump truck,
But it's,
the big guy.
it's also axle weight,
Yeah.
okay? It's not just.
This says
truck weight.
GVW though.
This, yeah, but it's, that's how it's calculated when you bring a crane in, it's an axle weight and how many axles are spread across, and same thing with a semi on the highway.
Yeah, that thing's ripping up our road.
Yeah, yeah.
And it
That's
doesn't say
the
anything about
difference between single axle and
flagging people and
triaxle,
all that stuff.
Because it's the distribution of that weight.
Well, that would be an easier way to do it, refer to it, anything in excess of it, single axle, like single rear axle vehicle would pay a fee, because then anyone with a tandem dump would have the fee paid or whatever. And I gather the cost recovery of here, although it seems very small, I presume the thought is that they create extra wear and tear, and so you put it into road repair. So the heavier vehicles will exactly cause more wear and tear on your roads.
Yeah. Now, if somebody's running trucks up and down our roads all the time, I suppose in theory they should pay $35 per load.
It is, that's the idea, that if they have to make 5 trips in one day, they would pay 5 times 35.
Okay, well that's
You
something
can
to bear in
definitely
mind.
look into it more, I can see how we enforce it, and.
Well, I think at this stage, then, what kind of truck are we talking about? Tandem axle?
Tandem axle
Tandem
and
axle's
regular.
your norm.
So that's a truck, though. What about a boat trailer? Tandem axle boat trailer.
Well,
Okay, tandem axle with dual wheels. How's that?
Okay. So a double bogey tandem axle.
Mhm.
So that would be a truck that's wearing our roads and causing noise and slowing traffic and just being general pain in the ass. Okay, good one.
Okay. The other one I had, this one, I feel like I brought it up too many times already. You're talking about on the next page, the top, extraordinary vehicle or trailer under 6, or referring to under 6.1 meters in length. The problem I have with it is there's an awful lot of people in the village with crew cab pickup trucks with long boxes. A crew cab long box with an 8-foot box, or yeah, is 6.55 meters or 21.5 feet. A 6.1 meter vehicle is 20 feet. So anybody with a long box crew cab pickup truck is going to be in the oversize rating. So I think the cutoff should be something like 6.5 meters for your parking areas. I know this is just for parking and whatnot. Like, for example, you're not allowed to park a vehicle over 6.1 meters at the side of the road overnight. I mean, even if you're in your own home or parking in front of your house, I don't think, as I understand it, you're not allowed your crew cab 8-foot box truck. So they took it, as I spoke to one of the writers of our previous bylaws, they just used West Van's number of 6.1, but I don't think it's a fair number to use.
In Lions Bay.
I think a better thing to do would be an extraordinary vehicle would be, say, a dual axle pickup truck. Oh, sorry, it's dual.
A tandem.
Well, I was thinking, yeah, well, that in
A
particular.
tandem, just
Yeah.
a tandem. Not-
If you're
not
parking
the
on the
axle.
roadway, but this is for things like horse trailers and boat trailers. If council says okay, then you get to do it. Well, so I mean, my issue is the first two of those categories are the same price.
Mhm.
So why do we even have the under 6.1?
Sorry, that's the one. The first one is added. I added that because we have a situation where the bylaw also allows for an application to be made, which we've just renewed recently, for someone to, they need to park a truck and their horse trailer on the street because they can't get up their driveway, and
Yeah.
then they pay $80 a month.
Yeah.
Um,
Or a boat trailer
but
or
it just
anything.
so happens that it's under 6.1. So we're kind of in no man's land, which is why I put this
Yeah, that's-
in,
yeah.
Well, I
with
read
the
this-
idea that we did amend the bylaw at some point.
I
as
read
well.
this to say that my truck is 6 or 6.1 meters, and I hook my fifth wheel up to it. I'm allowed 6.1 or 6.5 meters in length, plus 6.1 or 6.5 meters for the trailer.
No, I don't think that's what's intended.
Well, no, but that's the way I read it, because it says vehicle or trailer.
I believe the highway, our road bylaw, highway bylaw says you're not allowed to park a trailer hooked up to a truck on the road.
This is just defining the fee. It's
Yeah.
not defining
Okay,
what
no,
that
that's fine.
means.
Yeah, no, I
You have to go to the
understand,
bylaw to,
Yeah.
and the bylaw itself is as I think you've all noted, not the greatest, and not worded that
So
well.
then that means, that the vehicle or trailer, I take it then means that the vehicle attached is pulling the trailer, or the trailer by itself, not necessarily.
Yeah, we're just talking about
Yeah.
the fee now.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
I mean, I think that's a good catch. Do we want the first two to be the same price? I think so. But then shouldn't you just say 6.5, under 6.5 meters in that bit?
I don't know.
And this is specifically is an extraordinary vehicle, which is defined in the
Yeah.
building bylaw.
That's what I was
in-
thinking.
yeah,
The
but,
definition of the extraordinary I don't know it off the top of my head.
Yeah,
but
but
may
it's
not
eliminate
every
the
truck in the
pickup
world.
truck.
But this goes back to an old issue, and I don't wanna drag this on, but this goes back to an old issue that's been around for years in the village of Lions Bay. In fact, we have no RV parking anywhere in the village, no parking for extraordinary long vehicles. A lot of people have campers and RVs and boat trailers and stuff like that. They'd love to have a place to put them, but every time, there's been proposals put forward, but nobody's ever wanted to, it's never gone anywhere. And so, it's like, okay, how many times do we have this happen? Is it a big issue? Is it worth even having them here? Is it something that we create a lot of cash from, or is it something that is just another bylaw on the books for no, or another charge on the books for no reason? That's.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think
Part of the
that,
factor was sorry.
No, go on.
It was the limited parking as well, that we wanted to put some restrictions on it, not as a
Yeah.
disincentive, but not to just have all the parking spots taken
mean,
up by people parking their
When we
RVs.
bought, when we bought our trailer, we built a parking spot for it, and on our property, and, and it's there to this day.
a lot of places have, your trailer is not even allowed to be in view, or your boat for that matter. We're not quite that draconian, but we're at suburban spacing, and having trailers and boats everywhere doesn't look so hard. So there's a need for it, but in terms of the fee, all you're asking for, the change is quite minimal.
I was just trying to cover the situation.
Yeah.
The only situation that I'm aware of
Right.
where we collect a fee on an annual basis or a monthly basis, and it's not technically covered under the
Yeah.
current definition.
So let's, we may want to address this under a new highways, it is the highways bylaw, right?
Parking, and traffic and parking.
Traffic and parking.
I think
Okay.
the one you're referencing, she actually came to council asking for something, I forget how long ago that
It
was.
was with Nikki Hoagland, previous
With
public
Nikki,
works manager, and you approved it. So
The
this
horse
is just
trailer.
sort of
Yeah.
taking care of some of the details.
I think this is my neighbour, yeah, so I see they've got a new horse trailer, by the way. Okay, What else, Fred?
I got some minor comments, not really wasting time on it right now.
Well, this is your chance, because this is going to third reading.
Okay, last page, I think it is, page 63 and 68. Okay, it's not the last, page 20 on this thing. Fire rescue services for filming, it's down for $100 an hour. I question that that's enough. For example, if you have a one vehicle with a crew, it's usually tapped out for any call-outs or insurance at about $300, $350 an hour. So 100 seems very, very low.
But this is just for an inspection.
This is for
Oh, it's
filming?
an inspection fee? Oh, I thought it was a standby fee that you're...
Sorry.
Oh, I thought it was a standby fee. Filming?
Maybe I'm
Under-
looking at the wrong line.
Yeah, under filming, Schedule 7.
Page
Oh,
20.
I'm on the wrong, sorry, I'm on the wrong.
This way.
Sorry, I was
I'm
looking at the
on the
wrong
wrong
one too.
page.
Well, again, this is something that's now enshrined in a policy, the filming policy, which is a separate thing to... If you're making a film, all the rules change and your parking's different, which shouldn't be, by the way, but...
I think this is basically having fire services, per the filming policy, required to be on call
Yeah, but
and be
using
standby.
fire
And
deputies.
I'm not sure this happens a lot, but further to your point, maybe $100 an hour isn't enough. Yeah. I'm not sure we've ever had to charge it, but still, if we do have to charge it, we should have the right fee.
It'll come. When I worked for Westbound, I remember doing it myself,
Yeah.
being at one of the filming things, and Westbound certainly, back then, it was about $250 an hour, because you had a four-man crew and a
Yeah.
whole truck and everything, and you're
Yeah.
tying it up. And they have, not only do they have to pay, cover the actual cost of those guys being there, but you have to cover the cost of replacement crews as well.
Yeah.
So $100 an hour is nothing. in the
No,
film
I agree. Yeah, that should be more like $400 an hour. It doesn't going to come up very often, and when it does, we're going to call out our guys, pay them.
Yeah.
I mean, just the call-out fees, $200.
Yeah, okay, so we'll review that then.
Okay.
And the fireworks fee of 100. I mean, this is if they're letting off fireworks in Lions Bay.
That's for the permit, yes. That's how, when we're proposing it goes to $100. They have to
What's
get a
our cost on
permit.
that? Do we have to put a rider on our insurance, or
No, it's just the fire department goes and,
It's
Goes
just
in-
to make sure it's,
okay? Well, then we should probably make that the same fee, 400 as well.
well, no, 'cause this isn't, it's just the permit.
Just the
Um,
permit itself.
Just the permit itself. Is-
Okay, so when they go and inspect, it's X $100 an hour. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, good. Okay, what else, Fred?
No, that's it for me.
Okay, Jim?
No.
Okay, I had only a very few extra to that, so let me just, on page 54 of the package, the last one, alternate solutions, building inspection, actual cost plus 10%. What's the basis for charging an extra 10%?
so where are we?
Oh, sorry,
Page are you on?
page 54?
Yeah.
Um,
Just an administration fee?
yeah, it would be, but sorry, I can't see where you're looking.
Bottom row.
Oh, actual cost plus 10%. Yeah, it's just the administration because it's just the billing. Like
Okay,
we
fine.
have to get the actual cost, do a bill, collect it,
Okay, good.
fairly standard.
Okay.
So, yeah, if we called in a code professional, we're paying
Yeah, no, I
his bill
understand.
plus
So I was just wondering, are we within our rights to charge an extra 10%?
Yes, it's
But
actually quite common.
administrator.
okay, fine.
Administrative.
So next page, Schedule 3, Engineering and Public Works, the second line, sewer service connection fees.
Yes.
600? That sounds like a tenth of what it would cost to connect to sewer, in terms of punching into the line,
Oh,
digging
no,
the hole.
it's plus actual costs. So there's a fee
Oh, I
plus-
missed that. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
No, and then we did, it's not here, but we went over these ones with the Public Works Manager.
So I
said
missed the
building
plus
inspector.
actual cost.
Yeah.
Scratch that. Okay, thank you. Yeah. The page 59, the cleanup of spills or deposits on the highway, remediation of damage to the highway, and administration fee. We charge 75 for public works fees elsewhere. How do we get away with 100 here? Is it different people? I mean, if you look at, public works, we charge out 75 everywhere else. I'm not averse to 100, but I'm just wondering what the basis for that is.
No, I think it's a good point. We could, I'll discuss with Public Works Manager.
Okay.
Define highway.
Well, that is defined in the bylaw, so that's understood.
Roads, essentially.
I'm wondering whether we've got per hour of work versus other ones don't say, they just say per hour. Are we talking about man hours now, or
There's
there a
travel,
difference?
I don't know, you guys, I think just need to tighten up on that, make it the
Yeah,
same.
it needs to be consistent,
Yeah.
unless there is a reason for the increase in the cost.
Yeah.
Daily fee for placing dumpster on highway, $35. That's again, sorry, just above that.
Yes, that's for, basically the renovations we're talking about. If you
Yeah,
have the dumpster on municipal
There's
land,
probably
there's a
10 in the
daily-
village right now.
Yeah, there's a daily
We don't
fee.
enforce it.
Oh,
Yeah,
we
we
do.
do.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, we do.
collected about $1,800 on that. That's a revenue.
How do we enforce it?
They want a building permit, they're
part
gonna
of it.
have a dumpster.
It's part of the building permit.
Part of it, they gotta ask the questions and.
Okay, fine,
Yeah.
got you, okay,
And I
good.
like the idea of it being daily, because if it's monthly, they
Yeah.
just may not bother
Oh, sure.
removing it. So this forces them to remove it as soon as they're finished with it.
Yeah. One page over, page 61 of 68, the rental of the tennis court for program usage. My understanding is we don't allow rental of the tennis court for program usage.
How that came up is there was a resident, this is new,
Yeah, I see that.
someone was offering tennis lessons and then
Yeah.
some tutoring at their home, and it was very popular. But we actually didn't have a provision in the fees and charges bylaw to even allow them to do that. And it was a very popular program.
Yeah, I know,
So-
you used the
And we
doctors.
used to have tennis lessons. They used to be allowed. We used to have. as
So I
part
have
of our-
written down here the word insurance. So
Yes.
my understanding was that the word that was given, whether it was correct or not, is you can't use the tennis court for a paid program because we don't have the insurance for it.
It's the responsibility per our separate rules for renting it. They have to have their own insurance. So they would have to insure it themselves. Get
Okay,
insurance
so
coverage
just
for
to-
the students.
Mark's son offers, out of the goodness of his heart, paid, but minimally paid lessons to the kids in the summer. And he used Dr. Bell's court because the village wouldn't let him use our $65,000 fantastically refurbished municipal court. So this will solve that
And that
problem?
will solve it,
Okay.
yes. And with the reason we set a maximum 2 hours per day, it was just because it is our intent that residents can use it, so we didn't want it tied up all day.
Well,
with
at some point,
lessons.
there's any number of online scheduling requesters. The one that I use for the batting cages at West Van, we have 4. It's called skedder.com, in case you want to know. Okay, that's all I had.
Okay, so I
Um,
actually, okay.
I'm just gonna draw your attention to a couple of things. One is, so on page 52, I have discovered that the cost for North Shore News advertising, at the top of the page, official community plan amendment, we had plus 500 for advertising. That should say 2,000 because we have to put in 2 ads consecutively, and each ad's going to be $915. So,
That's how they make the money.
yeah. So the first 2 should be 2,000 instead of 500. And then also, where it says OCP or zoning amendment bracket non-residential, there should be an additional category below that that says comprehensive involving more than one zone or land use category. So that would be combined fees for the respective categories. And again, 2,000 for advertising fee. And was there anything else that I wanted to? So as I noted earlier, there's additional fees here for the yellow highlighted is all new. Request for preliminary review of development proposal. So they're paying the fee up front instead, and so I've reduced the actual land subdivision final approval application because a lot of the things that would normally be covered under the latter final approval are moved up in the process. So they pay the 2,000 up
Yeah.
front, and then they pay 1,000 at the end to finish it off for a total of 3, which would be the same as a charge for an official zone, community plan and zoning amendment combined. And I think that was the only other one that I wanted to specifically draw your attention to.
Okay, good, thanks. So let's move, sorry,
That's
Pam,
what I have
sorry,
one.
I beg your pardon.
The most important is guidance on the building permits.
Yeah,
So I provided some
Okay.
analysis. It's basically the council direction of what our fee should be. So I had done some analysis. Basically, the average fee on the $300,000 project is 57.5% higher than what we're currently charging.
Out of
And-
these
Yes,
samples?
of these samples, and the $900,000 project is 63% higher. You could just look in terms of what the local is, Squamish, Bowen Island, District of North Vancouver, and West Vancouver. They all tend to range higher. And the idea is, again, cost recovery, and just to put it in perspective, we had budgeted this year just for the bylaw inspector salary plus some administrative help from Susan, $19,500 is what our building inspector. There's more cost to the department, but the main cost is the salaries and benefits, which for 1 day a week, and he tends to, work about a day and a half a week, depending on demand. That costs us $19,500.
And the building permit fee does not cover that today? And that's
To
the only
date-
revenue that would be applied to the building inspector?
Yeah, to date, we've collected, right up until today, $12,700 for building permits. So if we increase the fee, and this is the lower end of the average, 60% increase in fee would generate another $7,600 in revenue.
Yeah.
So
And
we're
none of
looking
these
at-
other charges would go towards the building inspector, these would go towards other staff, planners and
A lot
what,
of them would
Peter?
go to the planning department, because of the building inspection, that's actually what we call planning and development. So a lot of these fees, under this section, the development section, they would go to.
Would these increases cover the shortfall? Especially as I suspect we're going to be needing additional building inspection resource sooner rather than later. So we actually don't have a choice, we have to increase our building permit fee.
That's staff's recommendation, yes, for a lot of reasons, just we're substantially lower than anyone else, and really our costs in a lot of ways
We've
are
got
the
to be,
same.
we've got to be in a situation where we're covering our costs,
Yeah.
make sure we cover our staff costs in all these situations, all these things.
Or at least a percentage of them. I mean, it's not always feasible to cover all
Well,
of
in
your
case
costs.
of a building
because it's
permit, in
service,
case of a
but-
building permit, it's
yeah.
very specific, and it
Yeah.
is staff time.
That's right.
Because there's review time, there's approval of plans and
Right.
drawings and
Yeah.
filing and.
Yeah, but it's not incremental staff time. Until we go over a certain line, then we need a new person or a new day.
But actually, the existing staff cost is going to go up.
Because his
Is-
time's gonna go up.
Pardon me?
His
No.
time will go up.
Well,
Well, but also,
just because of adjustments to
Yeah, normal
Yeah.
increases.
his contract.
Yeah.
Okay, so
as
which,
well as pending
Of course,
requirements
yeah,
of the
of
new
course, yeah,
building act.
yeah,
yeah.
So we're gonna have other issues. So our costs are gonna ratchet up quite quickly
Yeah.
here, so.
Yeah.
and that's the
We're-
current
we're
incumbent.
already
The future
behind.
incumbents will cost more, presumably. I mean,
So-
we're getting a good deal right now.
Not sure, but, yeah, we're at the moment, but it's definitely going up. So I think that you should be looking at the high
the
side.
higher end.
is my opinion, because
And I think
we're
it's-
not anywhere near covering.
But that's
And
what we
through-
need to hear.
And
We
through
need
our
to hear it has to be at the
conversations
high
with
end.
the building inspector, I mean, they actually comment on how low our fees are, and there's an expectation when people do renovations, especially when they have contractors who also do work in West Vancouver. I mean, there's an expectation that this is sort of the going rate for a building inspection, these higher rates are quoted.
Well, I must say, having done 3 myself, the building permit fee for me is a gulp. That's quite a lot of money.
I'm not saying it's not a lot of money, I'm just saying there are comments that
Yeah.
there's an expectation when people come in, they're expecting to pay what they pay in other municipalities. I'm not talking about individuals here, but people who are using developers.
Yeah. So I better get my kitchen project done soon.
Before January 1st.
There's no way.
Is that like insider trading?
Yeah, I think that's insider trading, so now I can't.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
It's an open meeting.
No, it's not conflict of interest, it's interest in common.
It's neither here nor there.
Yeah, it's neither here nor there. So you're recommending at the top end of the spectrum, hey?
towards the top.
I don't want to be West Vancouver,
Yeah.
but I can go District of North Vancouver type levels. They're regular Joes, just like us.
But their high end is higher than West End's high end.
Yeah, a little bit.
Interesting.
Is that because they have a flat component and a percentage
They
component?
have a sort of a flat component, they all do, plus a certain amount per square foot, so that's why the ratio, it's not completely a sliding scale.
Per square foot, so not dollar value
No, it's
based?
dollar value, so did I say, per $1,000, it's like a fixed fee per each additional $1,000.
What's to prevent your average developer underestimating? Do you ever know that they did?
They try and do that all the time.
So you have to check that?
Dave calls their bluff all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the value of the building inspector.
Yeah,
And
clearly.
they're also going out and they're just experts and they're doing their inspections and it's like, I think this is more than a $5,000 renovation.
I guess the reason I'm asking, is it not better does nobody do it on square footage? Or time, or,
I think it's just the value
Yeah.
of the
yeah.
of the renovation. That's.
I'm just seeking, anything that doesn't require us to prove something, to re-inspect, to go and check that somebody's paid their fee, saves us time.
Yeah. But this is the standard way. I
Yeah.
mean, the rates may change, but it's always based on, at least the
value,
ones we
dollar
looked
value.
at.
It's the methodology.
It's the methodology.
I don't
That's the
think,
word.
yeah, I wish
The
something we could
common
agree on that.
methodology.
Okay, so I think the nods around the table are sort of
Higher end.
higher
Higher
end.
end, as much as possible,
Yeah.
cover the cost.
So that would go into the third reading.
Yes.
Gulp.
I don't care whether it's a tie for second or third, but definitely one of them.
Okay. What else? Pam?
Nope, that was
You
all.
go-
It was
is that
just
it?
The guidance, that was, it was the building permit was the big one.
We don't have to receive these reports or anything, right? There's no decisions made here.
No.
Even just the procedural motions?
Yeah, I mean, you could, basically, yeah, I mean, you're receiving the report and
Providing
so
guidance.
sending it
stuff.
back, to staff to take your comments into consideration and come back with a bylaw for third reading.
Yeah, okay, so is there a recommendation on your report, Pam? We'll take that as the motion, if there is.
I don't think
Yeah.
so.
The page, I think, was just.
Yes,
that we looked
provide
at.
direction to staff. Okay, so we have done so we'll take that as a motion. Can I have a second? Thanks. And any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thanks. And should we do the same for the other one? Will just receive the report, right?
Yeah.
So let's just do a motion to receive the
Steve.
planning consultants, Steve Olmsted's report. Thanks. And a second. Any further discussion on that one? All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Okay, so do you want to defer 8B?
No.
You want to do it now?
Yeah.
Okay, you've all seen the report. It looks like this. This is the hard copy, if you'd like a hard copy. Peter sent it round on Sunday, right, Peter?
Yeah.
So he specifically asked for comments in line, which I gave some and I got satisfaction on. I'm good with it. So you're asking for 3 readings tonight.
Yeah, that would be the request. The amendments are, as noted in the report, intended to provide for and introduce a preliminary review process for any applications dealing with OCP and zoning amendments, as well as for any applications dealing with development permits, development variance permits, temporary use permits, which we don't currently have, by the way, and subdivisions. So there's very little guidance at the moment under the current bylaw or any of our bylaws for applicants or prospective applicants as to the type of information, plans and reports and so forth. So that's all been added to the bylaw and will address the need to provide guidance to applicants and give staff guidance as well in terms of pursuing these avenues with anyone who is making any application under those circumstances. So it's really something that helps move our strategic agenda forward and ultimately will assist those who are looking for direction in knowing what will be expected of them and what kinds of things we'll be looking for.
Well, yeah, to the extent that your average subdivision proponent in Lions Bay is going to read this and understand it, but you can presumably walk them through its real meaning.
Yeah, I will present or create educational material to go with
You
this.
said that, yeah, you're right.
And
you're right.
so I'll try and put that in more of a plain English kind of format so that people understand and are prompted to then ask questions if they don't understand.
So is the intention that this is just a stopgap, or does this apply going forward?
I think it's good for now, but depending, as we go forward, if we can pull together a subdivision servicing bylaw and other policies that council should consider around development and our OCP and the zoning bylaw, it may change. We may need to revisit it, but I think this is a good as you say, it's a stopgap, but it may turn into more than just a stopgap.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes. I think it's sort of a play it as it goes. Kind
Yeah,
of
I'm very conscious that this whole sort of suite of work is really absorbing a lot of your time. And given that we're looking at no more than around dozen of subdivision applications plus some development opportunities at the works yard and at the south end of Kelvin, this is probably more than enough for now. Before we start talking about subdivision servicing and.
I think it's sufficient for now. But yeah, I mean, notwithstanding that there may not be that many, they are important, and those people, of course, consider them important as well.
No, but I mean, they can be they can be done on a sort of ad hoc basis.
It's the incremental approach and
Yeah.
and taking them one by one, as we've talked about, and as is consistent with our OCP.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and then when we start talking about lands up north of the east of the gravel pit and Centennial lands and stuff, that's going to be many years from now,
well, that's a whole OCP conversation.
and that's
So-
that's a whole lot of extra
Yeah.
work before we
We
get.
already know we need this. We need to do something like
Well,
this.
so this is an alternative to the
Because-
moratorium approach, correct?
Yeah, that's not really a valid approach. So this is an approach which gives people guidance and enables them to start working on things if they're considering this kind of an application. So
And so after this is done, you would actually be in a position to I hesitate to use the word safely, but legitimately accept proposals.
yeah, they're not applications. There would be a request for
Yeah, it's as laid out here.
as laid out,
Yeah.
preliminary
Yeah.
review process to commence.
So that's good. That's sooner than we thought we could get it done, because the other approach needed all kinds of extra pieces in it.
Yeah, there's still work to be done, and but
it's-
in the new year, people
incremental,
People
so-
should So
So my only question, the thing that I don't remember, if you answered, I don't remember, was in the section 13. You said that you.
I love that section, by the way.
Section 13?
Yeah.
That means that Peter can charge what he wants to.
Well, exactly.
If he
But,
won't, council will.
it says may. Don't you want to say shall?
no, because
say
the as we saw with the introduction of new fees and the fees and charges bylaw, that's intended to cover the costs of processing things. And if you have something that's complex and is therefore going to cost more because there's more stuff to do and it's going to take longer, then you have the option of saying, okay, this is more complex. We need you to enter into this agreement and cover our extra costs. Our regular costs of a simple application are intended to be covered under the fees that have been introduced.
Mhm.
So if I'm of the opinion that they're not going to be covered, then I would request the applicant to enter into that.
No, I
agreement.
get that, why we
Yeah.
want it, but I'm saying, do you want to
I
say
don't-
may request or shall request?
Not shall, may request, because
They can
I
say
don't
no.
need to request it if it's not necessary. If it's covered by the fees,
Yeah, but-
then I
okay,
don't need
fine.
to request it.
You're happy,
Yeah.
Okay, I still say the proviso is if it's more than ordinarily complex, then you shall request the fee.
Who's going to determine that?
Carl, the cat's is scratching
It's
the
the same.
ground.
Anyways, I think
I
it's,
just don't want
think
people to
it's
say, well, Peter, just give me a break, because you don't have to, it's only a may.
Yeah, no, I didn't actually change the may that was in there already. So this is the paragraph already existed. I've tweaked it,
Okay,
but
Oh, I see.
it already existed as a may.
Well, that means it's probably wrong.
Good, thank you.
Okay, so anything else, guys?
Nope.
So the recommendation, Peter, is to take it to give it 3 readings
No,
tonight.
no, well, the recommendation is to push it forward to council for
Yeah.
consideration tonight.
So that we recommend to council that council does that, and we will tell council that when we see them tonight.
And, yes.
So can we have that motion as written and a second? Any further? All in favour? Opposed? That carries. Okay. Moving to item 9, public questions and comments. Seeing none, we'll move to adjournment. Motion to adjourn. Second. All in favour? Opposed? That carries.